Chapter 1452. The shadow of the man in black vanished. He had given up the chance to transcend from the ground and ascend to the starry sky. Yunyang would not believe it if he said that he was not shaken or even regretful. In spite of this, Yunyang believed that he could also ascend to the starry sky with his own strength. He was indignant to achieve such a state with the help of external forces, especially at a time like this. He was more worried that he would lose something. If he had gone up with the help of the man in black, Yunyang was sure that although he could attain the power of the starry sky, it would be hard for him to improve in this lifetime. He would never be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the elder brother he had just acknowledged, let alone attain the supreme position of the starry sky. However, when Yunyang stepped on the first step of the 7th-floor staircase, the tinge of regret that he had initially felt was magnified abruptly. It was an overwhelming sense of regret that could not be further compounded. If he had known earlier, he would have asked his elder brother to send him up. Actually, it was already good enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Almighty. At least, it was much better than bearing the suffering before his eyes. The moment he stepped on the stairs, Yunyang felt a piercing pain shoot up from his feet. A few powerful forces surged upwards, unstoppable and unstoppable, rampaging through his flesh and blood like hacksaws. A moment later, thousands of gusts of chilly wind descended from his Baihui acupoint, filling his brain, chest, and internal organs. Another moment later, countless forces and types of forces surged forward, converging towards Yunyang like a myriad of qi returning to its origin. Not only could Yunyang not defend against such a force, he could not even defend himself against it. His flesh, bones, meridians, deific consciousness, and soul, every part of him was pulverized under the overwhelming force. Yes, pulverized. Not only was he dismembered and broken inch by inch, but he was literally pulverized into powder. Right now, Yunyang was like a ball of mud, slumped to the ground, allowing the invading force to knead him as it pleased. What was even more bizarre was that Yunyang's senses were still present under such circumstances, and they were unprecedentedly sensitive. This had also resulted in Yunyang being able to feel every bit of pain that he had to endure clearly and without mistake. However, this unprecedentedly sensitive sense was what broke Yunyang the most. How good would it be if he had fainted? How blissful was that? Even if he died directly, he wouldn't have to endure such extreme pain. I want to give up. In spite of this, Yunyang was not dead nor had he fainted. In fact, he was feeling everything that was happening in a state that was more lucid than usual. Even if his physical body perished, his spirit was still full of energy. His spirit and consciousness were still 100 times more spirited than before. Yunyang almost cursed. His father's physical body was gone, and his nerves of pain should have been severed as well. How could he still feel it? This shouldn't be the case. It was completely different from the understanding of cultivation he had along the way. However, it was one thing for his physical body to shatter and his soul to dissipate, but Yunyang's life force was still intact. If he did not adapt, he would stay here forever. Yunyang struggled to save himself amidst the excruciating pain. His physical body had turned into dust, but he was still nearby. His soul had dissipated and was scattered around as well. He needed to save himself. Only by saving himself could he have hope and a chance. If he gave up now, he would only be paralyzed and he would not be able to get through this stage. Yunyang gathered his scattered soul amidst the excruciating pain. Finally, after the previous incident, Yunyang's soul had grown stronger due to his deific consciousness. Although it was scattered by countless forces, he could still sense and control it. As Yunyang gathered his soul bit by bit, he used the power of his soul as a foundation to reconstruct his body from head to toe, bit by bit. However, with every bit of flesh and blood that was reconstructed, the pain that came with it increased by several folds. The excruciating pain that filled every part of his body and heart was incessant, assaulting Yunyang's spirit without a break. Yunyang had finally reconstructed his shoulder, but an unprecedented pain assaulted him, distracting him for a moment. His newly reconstructed physical body crumbled again, all his efforts going down the drain. Yunyang cursed 10,000 different profanities in his heart, using them to vent the emotions that felt like a million beasts were galloping past him. However, there was no other way. If he failed, he could only start all over again. There was only one way to describe such a situation. He had to endure the torture of 1,000 cuts, and yet he had to laugh heartily, without the slightest bit of reluctance. He had to be happy from the bottom of his heart, and he could not be distracted at all. A slight distraction meant that he had to start all over again. All his efforts would vanish in an instant. Yunyang, who had maintained a clear mind, was extremely dispirited. Was this really him? Could he really make it? Could he actually do it? After a full 2 hours, Yun Yang had finally regathered his physical body. However, his physical body was extremely frail now. He was only sustained by the power of his deific consciousness. There was not a single ounce of energy left in him. He stayed where he was, slowly adjusting his breath and recuperating his foundation. However, in the process of nurturing his body, Yun Yang was shocked to realize that the flesh and skin of his reconstructed body was glowing with a faint silver light. The sturdiness of his body had increased by almost half compared to before. Although there's a significant improvement, the price is too high. I might have to stay here forever if I'm not careful. Yun Yang, whose physical body had been fully restored, could finally catch his breath. Without any discomfort, he stepped onto the second step naturally. The second step shouldn't be like this, should it? His first foot did not feel anything at all. Delighted, Yun Yang hurried to step on the second step as well. Arg! Yun Yang let out a heart-wrenching howl as he collapsed like a pile of mud for the second time. The process was the same as before, but perhaps because his physical body was much stronger than before, the pain from the disintegration of his physical body had increased tremendously this time. With his first experience, Yun Yang did the same as before, struggling to survive and reconstructing himself. When he was done with the second step, Yun Yang's flesh and blood were glowing a bright silver. When he was done with the third step, Yun Yang's flesh, meridians and bones had turned a pale gold. At the fourth step, his flesh and bones were gold while his internal organs were pale gold. At the fifth step, his flesh and bones were jade while his internal organs were pure gold. At the sixth step, his flesh and bones were precious jade while his internal organs were white jade. When he reached the seventh step, he was transparent from the inside out. At the eighth step, the inside and outside of his body were one, clear and transparent without any impurities. When he reached the final ninth step, all the strange colors that were different from his physical body had faded away, returning to the original color of his body, which was called the human color. It looked like he had returned to his original appearance, but Yun Yang truly felt that he was completely different from the inside out. Yun Yang had finally ascended to the seventh step, the highest level of the Supreme Heaven Pavilion that had only been passed down in legends for a long time. No one had actually stepped into it. However, he had already lost track of time. He had no idea how long he had been in here. It was just that the time he took to reconstruct his body grew longer and longer until he did not notice the passage of time at all. He ascended in high spirits, confident that even if there were still obstacles in front of him, he would be able to deal with them. After ascending to the seventh level, he didn't encounter any more trials. Instead, the entire seventh level was filled with strange phenomena. Golden lotuses were descending from the heavens, one after another, falling from the heavens. Yun Yang was bathed in the glow. You're amazing, young Master Yun. I think that all the heroes in this world should admire you. All the beauties in this world should fall in love with you. You're truly worthy of it. Just because of this, it's enough. Young Master Yun, you should be the dream lover of all the women in the bound of universe, the #1 idol of all men. How did you get through it? I'm completely convinced by you. However, Yun Yang did not have the confidence nor the courage to come back to Supreme Heaven Pavilion again. A large part of the reason he had to endure it the first time was due to the fearlessness of the ignorant and the fact that he was caught between a rock and a hard place. If he did not persevere, he might perish forever. He had no choice but to do it again. He would be crushed by his own psychological construction before he even started. Yun Yang could not help but sigh with lingering fear. The golden lotus baptism was still going on, falling piece by piece. Yun Yang did not have enough time to absorb the baptism into his body, but he did not waste it either. The excess was absorbed by the greedy Emmy into his deific consciousness space. His deific consciousness space was also filled with golden lotuses. The golden lotuses in the sky were still falling as if there was no end to them. Yun Yang's cultivation base improved bit by bit, advancing bravely and vigorously. Dongfang Haoran and the others had only waited outside for a few days before their disciples flew out like cannonballs. What comforted the three rulers was that 3 of them had already obtained the qualification to inherit the celestial palace. The most basic task had been completed successfully, so the trip was not in vain. After a while, the Eagle King came out as well. He had lasted a little longer than Huan Wenyuan and the others, so naturally he came out a little later. However, Yun Yang had not come out yet. The 3 of them discussed and decided to continue waiting. After all, they were very interested in the future of Supreme Heaven Pavilion. After waiting for a day, King Yama left the Supreme Heavenly Pavilion in a gray fog. Shiman Fengfu and the others wanted to stop this guy and ask him about his origins. However, after King Yama left the Supreme Heavenly Pavilion, he plunged into the ground and disappeared just like that. He did not care about them at all. The three rulers were caught off guard and could do nothing about it. Yunyang was still inside. Let's wait for Yunyang to come out and leave together. It looks like this child has gained a lot in Supreme Heaven Pavilion. However, another 10 days had passed and Yunyang still had not come out. Eagle King, go back with Lanting and the others and explain the situation here. We will continue to wait here. More than a month had passed. Why isn't he out yet? 2 months had passed. Are we still waiting? What has Yunyang gone through? Why hasn't he come out after going in? As the three of them were discussing, there was a sudden swoosh in the sky. Supreme Heaven Pavilion had disappeared. All that was left was a piece of paper fluttering down from the sky. Supreme Heaven Pavilion will never come out again. Reading the contents of the paper, the three rulers felt a sense of loss. Supreme Heaven Pavilion that stood proudly at the pinnacle of the bound of universe, the most mysterious and towering for countless years, had actually disappeared. Where had Yunyang gone then? The three heavenly palaces have been using this to select their heirs for hundreds of thousands of years, but now it's gone. What's more infuriating is that once Yunyang went in, Supreme Heaven Pavilion disappeared just like that. Who would believe that there's no connection between the two? Shimin Fafu frowned. Is there even a need to ask? Beigong Lioli rolled her eyes. I'm already suspecting that the three heavenly palaces have been wasting our efforts all these years. We've been putting on a show for the blind and we've been delusional. Supreme Heaven Pavilion has actually been waiting for one person from the beginning, and this person is Yunyang. As for you, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Silly bird. Beigong Lioli spat on Shimin Fafu's face. Shimin Fafu was not angered, but he sighed dejectedly. I think so too. All these years, the Supreme Heaven Pavilion has been toying with us. Dongfang Haoren was stunned for a moment before he said, it might not be Yunyang. It's just that none of the successors of the three heavenly palaces has been able to obtain the true heritage of the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Now that the Supreme Heaven Pavilion is no more, I believe Yunyang has a place to go. We don't have to wait any longer, let's go back. We still have to train the younger generation and plan how the palace will be passed on in the future. Once everything is settled, we can officially hand over. Then the three of us can rest for a while. Shimin Fanfu chuckled. Rest? I'm afraid we'll have to go to the Blood Soul Mountain and rest while fighting with the demon clan. The three of them laughed and left together. I have no confidence in this battle. I'm not sure either. But we only have one life, and our mission has been completed. We've protected the heavenly palace well, and our heritage hasn't been broken in our hands. The demon clan hasn't been able to take a step past the Blood Soul Mountain. As for our fellow humans, we've been recuperating, and our population is 10 times more than when we first became palace masters. At least in terms of human reproduction, we've done well. Now that I think about it, the only thing we haven't done well is probably not teaching our sons well. We've let down our brothers who died in the battle. But we've given birth to a few more. If there's a chance, we must train them well. It's all thanks to Yunyang that we have these children. Do UF** King know how to talk? Shut up if you don't. I should say, it's all thanks to Yunyang's air of vitality. It's easy to misunderstand this. Just say, it's all thanks to Yunyang's help. Get lost. The three of them bickered as they walked away relaxed. A whole year had passed. In this year, the bound of universe had changed drastically, even more than the changes of the past 10,000 years. The Palace of Nine Supremes rose mightily. Wherever it passed, it was invincible. The Demiurge Flawed 10 stepped into the martial world once more. Each of them had a brand new title, and they were renowned in the bound of universe. No one dared to mention their past names anymore. Well, it was mainly because no one dared to. First, there was the incident of Phoenix Cry sect's eldest disciple, Chi Lai's humiliation and the massacre of the Palace of Nine Supremes higher-ups. As for the latter, almost all the famous rankings in the martial world had been occupied by the Palace of Nine Supremes disciples. They could not wait to avoid it so they would not overestimate themselves and seek death. The Heaven ranking, Earth ranking, Man ranking, and Rookie ranking had basically become the stage for the Palace of Nine Supremes disciples. Disciples from other sects would never be able to squeeze into the top 10 or 20 rankings anyway. If it was the top 50, perhaps 3 to 5 of them might be lucky enough to make it. The Palace of Nine Supremes achievement had confirmed that it had become a supreme class sect that had never appeared in the bound of universe since ancient times. 7 months ago, the Palace of Nine Supremes' 4 disciples had challenged the heirs of the 3 heavenly palaces and divine punishment Holy Land and won, shocking the world with their achievements. 5 months ago, the Palace of Nine Supremes' high priest, Dong Qitian, had led 3 half-saints and 24 Lord Saints to challenge the same level experts from the 3 heavenly palaces. In the end, the record of 25 battles and 17 victories had shaken the bound of universe once more. From that day onwards, the Palace of 9 Supremes had become the bound of universe's undisputed number 1 sect, although it was still below the 3 heavenly palaces and divine punishment Holy Land in name. No one dared disobey its command in the martial world. The Palace of 9 Supremes disciples had grown to 100,000. This number was only after the official disciples had reached 100,000, when the Palace of 9 Supremes officially announced that it would close its doors and no longer recruit disciples. In the future, it would open its doors once every 60 years to recruit disciples. Otherwise, the number of disciples would continue to increase. Everyone was surprised and puzzled by this decision. The sect leader has said that the doors will be closed when the number of disciples reaches 100,000. Sect leader Yun has said that the martial world cannot be dominated by one sect. 100 sects contending for supremacy is the way to long-term peace. As for the Palace of 9 Supremes, it had already possessed the same or even stronger strength as the 3 heavenly palaces, but it had not been upgraded. The sect leader is not here. Everything will be handled when he returns. After winning the challenge against the 3 heavenly palaces Lord Saints, the Palace of 9 Supremes would send 20,000 experts to guard the Blood Soul Mountain every 2 months, rotating every 2 months. One of the reasons for this was that the heads of the demon experts were a major source of contribution points for the Palace of 9 Supremes. It was also because of this that the Palace of 9 Supremes' method of nurturing disciples was very different from before. It was no longer the nanny and protection of the disciples like before, but the disciples were free to go on their own. If the disciple died, the sect would avenge him or her, but they would definitely be the nanny and escort him or her. This was so that the disciples could receive the most extreme training in actual combat. Life and death depended on themselves. This proposal had caused great controversy within the Palace of 9 Supremes, and it had only been approved after a long time. It had to be said that the cultivation base of the Palace of 9 Supremes disciples was secondary after that. Their actual combat strength had suddenly become terrifying. Even if their own cultivation base and strength were equal or even slightly superior, when they encountered the Palace of 9 Supremes disciples, the disciples of the Palace of 9 Supremes would mostly win. When 10 months had passed, the East Celestial Palace's Lord, Dongfang Haoren, sighed from the bottom of his heart. As long as the Blood Soul Mountain is not lost, the bound of universe will enter the era of the Palace of 9 Supremes. This deadline will be far, far away. He then added, unless the Palace of 9 Supremes falls into internal strife and falls apart many years later, no one and no force can shake it. When this sentence spread throughout the martial world, it was ordered by the Palace of 9 Supremes leader's wife, Ji Lingxi, to be engraved on a stone tablet that was 1,000 feet tall. She then combined the power of all the saints in the Palace of 9 Supremes to strengthen the stone tablet permanently and placed it at the most prominent mountain gate of the Palace of 9 Supremes to serve as a warning to future generations. Throughout the year, the sky above the Palace of 9 Supremes shone brightly. The wife of the Palace of 9 Supremes leader, Ji Lingxi, had broken through to the saint level after Yin Yang. Rainbows fell from the sky and golden lotuses bloomed from the ground. A few days later, Shengguan Lingxiu, the wife of the Hall of 9 Supremes leader, broke through to the saint level as well. A strange phenomenon appeared in the sky. Half a month later, the chief high priest of the 9 Supremes temple, Dong Qitian, broke through to the saint level. In another 20 days, Shi Wuchen, the temple of 9 Supremes vice supreme, was the first to break through to the saint realm, followed by Luo Dajiang and Tai Qingsang. At this point, the Palace of 9 Supremes had a total of 6 saints. Such strength was enough to suffocate the entire Xinhuang world. By the end of the year, the Temple of 9 Supremes had more than 200 lords and at most 15 half-saints. Among them, Ling Xiaozue and Duguqiu had broken through to Sage to be. This kind of overall strength was already comparable to the combined strength of the 3 great heavenly palaces. Even if they were to face the combined strength of the 3 great heavenly palaces head-on, they might not necessarily lose. Just as Dongfang Haoren had said, the era of the 9 Supremes had officially arrived. 2 months after the New Year's Day, the entire Xinhuang world, including the various levels of the planes, suddenly received a piece of news in their dreams. A message from the dream. From that day onwards, the underworld would be reopened, and the 6 paths of reincarnation would be reopened. For a time, the legend of the 6 paths of reincarnation spread like wildfire. Everyone had the same dream. This was already a shocking miracle, But what was even more shocking was that the person who spread the news was from the Palace of Nine Supremes. On the same day, thunder rumbled in the sky. Countless rainbows filled the world, crisscrossing and crisscrossing, including the realm of demons. Rainbows hung in the sky as spiritual chi of heaven and earth poured down. Everyone raised their heads and stared at this strange phenomenon. In the sky, a magnificent and majestic palace was hidden in the clouds, faintly discernible, slowly ascending. From being clearly visible, to being blurry, to being even higher and finally disappearing. In the end, a dazzling rainbow fell from the sky into the Palace of Nine Supremes and disappeared. Another wave of extreme yin-chi rose from the ground and turned into a nether dragon. Shaking its head and tail, it also rushed into the Palace of Nine Supremes and disappeared. Before the Palace of Nine Supremes, there was an additional white fog pool, and behind the mountain, there was an additional yin-yang river. Each of them had their own mysteries and mysteries. At the same time, the demon race seemed to be aware of the situation in the bound of universe and began to intensify their attacks. They could accept that the two sides were evenly matched, but they would not allow the bound of universe to be stronger than the demon race no matter what. Now, new faces kept appearing at the entrance of the Blood Soul Mountain, which made the demon race realize that the bound of universe was moving closer to the bottom line. This chapter was 6,900. Many things were starting to be simplified. Thinking of the two pitfalls, he was a little lost. Let me think of how to make up for it. Chapter 1453. Everyone, please understand that I'm going to drink with the old man to his heart's content today. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival to everyone from I Am the Supreme. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1454. However, when the residence of Nine Supremes was developing rapidly, their sect leader had gone missing once again. He had gone missing when he was in the same place with the three rulers of the bound of universe, carrying out a task together. When Dongfang Haoren and the others returned, they sent a message to the residents of Nine Supremes, stating that Yun Yang had gone missing when he was challenging the Supreme Heaven Pavilion and that his whereabouts were temporarily unknown. With this, the residents of Nine Supremes, who were not anxious at all, became even more relaxed. Their attitude was like they did not suspect that the three rulers had plotted to murder their own sect leaders upon seeing the Nine Supremes Palace's bright future. They believed everything they said and waited patiently. What was even more surprising was that not only were the people of the Palace of Nine Supremes not anxious, even the two sect leaders' wives were not worried at all. It was rather puzzling. Zhan Wufei, the leader of the Sacred Heart Palace, an old acquaintance of the Palace of Nine Supremes, would visit the Palace of Nine Supremes whenever he was free. Of course, his main purpose was to freeload the cultivation environment. He had once joked with Ji Lingxi, sister-in-law, that fellow Yun Yang has suddenly disappeared. With his current cultivation base and capability, there doesn't seem to be anyone in this world who can do anything to him. His sudden disappearance. I'm thinking, maybe he's hiding somewhere to have some fun. Sister-in-law, you have to keep a close eye on him. Supreme Yun is a hot commodity in the hearts of the ladies in this world. Ji Lingxi replied gracefully, Don't worry, brother Zhan. Men are all like this. Let him go out and have fun. When he's done, he'll naturally come back. Shengguan Lingxiu chuckled and said, When Yun Yang comes back, I'll definitely ask him where he's fooling around. The brother Zhan says so, of course he has a criminal record. Zhan Wufei pulled a long face and said, Actually, I'm only mentioning a possibility. I didn't say that brother Yun has really gone out to have fun. I'm actually not very close to him, really not. After he finished speaking, he hurriedly ran away. Was it true that Zhan Wufei was not close to Yun Yang? They had only met each other 3 to 5 times, so what Zhan Wufei had said was the truth. However, everyone in the bound of universe knew that Sacred Heart Palace's Hall Master Zhan and residents of Nine Supreme Cloud were very close, and they were like old friends. If he were to be taught a lesson by Yun Yang because of this, Zhan Wufei felt that he would be in a worse state than Yun Yang. It would be strange if Yun Yang did not kill him. What he did not know even more was that after he left, Ji Lingxi and Shengguan Lingxiu had gathered for a small meeting to confirm their strategy. Say, do you think this fellow has really gone out to fool around? Ji Lingxi frowned. I don't think so, but this is really hard to say. Shengguan Lingxiu frowned as well. This fellow has indeed been held back by us. I heard that when a man becomes an adult, especially a young man like that fellow, he will always have some desire. Sister Lingxiu, look at you. I didn't have a choice here. It wasn't my wish to keep him to myself. You said that you asked your master for help, that's why you ended up like me? Ji Lingxi was a little distressed. Shangguan Lingxiu blushed as she retorted, "What are you talking about, girl? What are you willing to do? Don't you know any shame? If I were to snatch it from you, would you have given in? Wouldn't you be staring at me all the time?" Ji Lingxi sighed and said, "Why would I stare at you? We've been his since a long time ago. What's there to be shy about? What's the use of being the sect leader's wife now? What if someone really snatches it away from me? If I didn't have this, I would have. Sister Lingxiu, do you think he's still young? After this year he'll be 25 or 26. What he cultivates isn't the virgin skill. Even if it was, with his current cultivation base, he would have completed it a long time ago. What if someone else takes advantage of him if he continues like this?" Shangguan Lingxiu lowered her head, blushing without saying a word. After a while, her face and neck were flushed as if she wanted to say something but dared not. Ji Lingxi began to grumble again, "It's all that person's fault. I don't know what kind of restriction he put on me, but it's so overbearing. I'm already at the level of a saint, but I still can't remove it. I can't even control it. This is really infuriating. When I see him, I'll give him a good scolding no matter who he is. Controlling heaven and earth, and here it is. This old fart's method is simply deranged and makes one's hair stand on end." Ji Lingxi's pretty face was filled with anger, embarrassment, and anger. Shangguan Lingxiu's face was as red as a sheet as she suddenly said, "Well, younger sister Lingxi, there's something I forgot to tell you. When I asked my master to help me set up the seal that day, there was an additional layer." Ji Lingxi's expression darkened when she heard that. "Do I have to become a cosmic almighty to remove it? How can I do that?" Shangguan Lingxiu's pretty face looked like it was about to bleed. "No. Actually, my grandmaster said that the cultivation base of a saint is the pinnacle of the bound of universe. So, as long as Yunyang and I are both at the level of a saint, the restriction on me won't work anymore." Ji Lingxi was taken aback, only replying after a while, "Doesn't that mean?" The two girls mumbled for a long time. Shangguan Lingxiu was flushed throughout while Ji Lingxi was exhilarated. "Wait for him to come back. You're lucky Yunyang was still in Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Supreme Heaven Pavilion was said to be no longer in the bound of universe, but it did not really cease to exist. The golden lotus descending on the 7th level had long disappeared, but he had yet to wake up. Instead, he was immersed in a deep level of enlightenment. The martial way, the martial way. Entering the Tao from the martial way? Or was it because of the martial way? It was said that the cultivation of the martial way was a defiance of nature, but each time there was a breakthrough at a critical moment, there would always be some blessings from the heavens. For example, some breakthroughs in the level would attract the heavens' thunder trial. How many talented heroes would perish under the thunder trial and die prematurely in the process? However, as long as one survived the thunder trial, he would be reborn and his ability would take a leap. If the cultivation of the martial way was truly a defiance of nature, there would only be death or overcoming the obstacle. There would not be a rebirth after overcoming the obstacle and the death trial, nor would there be a sudden rise in ability. It was a breakthrough in the level of the cultivation method, but it was undeniable that it was also the generosity of the heavens. From this enlightenment, Yunyang felt that this was not a defiance of nature, but a test of one's standards by the heavens. If one passed the test, one would naturally be rewarded. Conversely, those who did not would have to pay the price. Therefore, cultivation is not a defiance of nature. As Yunyang thought about this, he suddenly felt that his thoughts were unprecedentedly smooth and clear. Cultivation is nothing but using one's own effort to break through the shackles that seem impossible in the eyes of others. He retreated from his thoughts, feeling that his body had undergone a qualitative change. However, it was still unclear how far he had gone. It was difficult to come to a conclusion. He was the only one left in Supreme Heaven Pavilion, and it seemed like he was no longer on the 7th floor but in a spacious hall. "Oh, here." It was at this moment that a voice called out, "Young Nine." Yunyang turned to look towards the source of the voice. What he could see was a brightly lit hall. It was a huge dining hall. Behind him, a smiling face was warm and radiant, a beauty that could topple a city. The beauty was right in front of him, but the true identity of the person in front of him shocked Yunyang. For a moment, he could only feel himself trembling, the blood in his body almost rushing to his face. He said in disbelief, trembling, "Sister Yu?" The woman in front of him was elegant and graceful, her charm was indescribable. Who else could it be other than Yun Zuyu, whom he had not seen for a long time? Beside her, another woman smiled sweetly and said, "Do you only see your sister Yu and not me?" The person who spoke was also extraordinarily beautiful, like an orchid in the deep valley, elegant and graceful. "Your Sister Lan?" Yun Yang felt like he was in a dream. Of the two people in front of him, one was Yun Zuyu, who had apparently died in the fire cave, while the other was Yu Rulan, who had suddenly disappeared. Supreme Flame's beauty and Supreme Wind's fiancé. "Two sisters, why are you here?" Although it felt like a dream, Yun Yang could only rejoice at the moment. He would never think that he was dreaming. In other words, this was the reality, the truth. The two women had truly appeared in front of him, alive and well. They were definitely not fakes. Although Yun Yang had a hunch that the two women would not die, he was still overjoyed and comforted to see them appear in front of him, alive and well. "We are not the only ones here." Yun Zuyu smiled sweetly and opened the door, saying, "Young brother, please come in." Yun Yang understood the meaning of the tone. The anticipation buried deep in his heart rose abruptly as he rushed in impatiently. Sure enough, there were 8 people standing neatly in the room. All 8 of them wore masks, but they were masks that Yun Yang was extremely familiar with. Yun Yang dashed over with inexplicable joy, his footsteps never stopping, but his heart sank. 8 people? How could there be 8 of them? Could there be a trick in this? In Yun Yang's estimation, even under the most optimistic scenario, only Supreme Flame, Supreme Wind, and Supreme Wood would have a higher chance of surviving. As for the eldest, Supreme Earth, Supreme Water, and Supreme Thunder, they were all natives of Tianshan Continent or the Bound of Universe. They did not have the help of the underhand Almighty, so how could they have escaped the death trap that day? If there was a fluke, how could they have watched Yutang's crisis and the various events that would follow? What was going on? His brothers were right in front of him, but Yun Yang was stunned, his hesitation and fear rising. Despite his hesitation, he dared not act rashly, afraid that he would disturb this sweet dream. Even though he was in an illusion, it was just a dream. Yun Yang still hoped that this sweet dream would last a little longer. Once it was broken, the dream would no longer exist, and he would no longer have the chance to reunite with his 8 brothers. Seeing Yun Yang's hasty advance and retreating due to his emotions, his cautious and hesitant demeanor, the 8 of them guffawed in unison. "What? The majestic Lord Supreme Cloud doesn't know how to speak when he sees us?" The one who spoke was Supreme Wind Ji Lingfeng. This fellow's tone was laced with the air of hypocrisy that Yun Yang was most familiar with. It was as if he had seen a fat pig that had secretly eaten the cabbages that he had been raising for many years. You all," Supreme Wind continued in a sour tone, "oh my, look at our Lord Supreme Cloud. He's really grown up now. He doesn't even know how to say a few polite words when he sees his brothers." The others guffawed. Supreme Earth, the leader of the 9 Supremes, was the first to speak. "Young Ninth, we brothers will meet again today. We know that you have countless questions in your heart. Don't be hasty, take your seats first. Sit tight, sit tight. Let us talk as we eat one by one." Yun Yang saw his seat at once. It was still the last. Although Yun Zuyu and Yu Rulan were also present, he was still at the last place, 2 more places lower than before. He sat down dumbly and looked at Supreme Water, who was dressed in a black robe beside Supreme Earth. He studied her closely. She was wearing a mask and a loose black robe. It was hard to tell that she was a woman. If he could not tell now, he would not have been able to tell back then. However, this familiar feeling calmed him down. He sat down and seemed to have gained more confidence. His heart immediately gave birth to a feeling of stability and comfort that he hadn't felt for a very long time. He shook his head and said with a smile, "All of you are fine. I almost cried until my eyes went blind, and I even killed so many people to avenge all of you. I didn't expect." Sigh. Yun Yang sighed, picking up the goblet of wine in front of him and draining it in one gulp. The brothers all saw his eyes turn red in an instant. They also saw a drop of tear quietly dripping into the wine glass. They saw that he was using the posture of drinking to cover it up, but no one exposed him. They looked at each other, and for a moment the atmosphere became slightly heavy. Yun Zuyu looked left and right and said with a smile, "Didn't all of you say that you want to play a fun game with Young Ninth? Why aren't all of you talking? Do you still want to play?" Of course we want to play. How can we not play such a fun game?" "Ah." The others guffawed. Then the 8 people opposite them stood up in unison. Supreme Water sat down again and removed her mask, revealing a gentle and beautiful face. She said, "I think I won't be joining." Yes, you're too obvious." The other 7 people chortled. Following which, the 7 masked men gathered together and walked around in a circle. Then with a whoosh they lined up in a row. Yun Yang glanced over and saw that all 7 of them had removed their masks. What stood before him were 7 young men who looked extremely unfamiliar. All of them stared at Yin Yang without saying a word. Supreme Water chuckled and said, "Young Ninth, why don't you guess who they are? If all of them are right, each of us will drink a goblet. If anyone guesses wrongly, you'll be punished with 8 goblets. That's not too difficult, is it?" The 7 of them gathered together and it was unknown who spoke. "If he guesses wrongly, he'll only be punished with 8 goblets. Isn't that too easy for him?" The others said in unison, "If he guesses wrongly, we'll beat him up together." Yun Yang guffawed and said, "If I were to even mistake my own brother, I'll accept the punishment willingly. I'll have no complaints even if I'm beaten to death." He then turned to the 7 people and said, "Big brother, I've seen your portrait in Yutong's palace before. You don't have to guess anymore. You and sister-in-law will uphold justice together, all right?" One of the young men was taken aback and said in surprise, "But I've already changed." Once he spoke, he knew that he had been tricked. The others shot him contemptuous glances. Supreme Earth knew that he had let the cat out of the bag. He sighed inwardly and returned to his original appearance. He sat down dejectedly and poured himself a goblet of wine with a long face, saying, "According to what was said, I'll punish myself with a goblet." Then he drained it in one gulp. Chapter 1455. Although he had managed to lure his boss out with a single sentence, Yun Yang did not feel relieved. Moreover, he knew very well that Supreme Earth had done it on purpose. He had fallen for the trap and exposed his weakness. Whether it was the former eldest prince of Yutong or the leader of the 9 Supremes, if he did not even have this little bit of shrewdness and strategy, how could he be trusted? In comparison, as the eldest of the 9 Supremes, it was more appropriate for him to be the judge. It would be difficult to distinguish the remaining few fellows. It was pure nonsense to distinguish them based on their physique and appearance. The 6 of them looked like sextuplets, all of them crossing their arms in front of their chests and looking askance at him. Whether it was their height, weight, or even their expressions, they were all the same. Even if their faces were different, it was useless. Although the 9 Supremes had a deep friendship, they had never seen each other face to face. How could he identify them? Yun Yang scratched his head, deep in thought, but inwardly he was baffled. He wanted to admit defeat. The excuse was ready-made. "Although we are brothers, I have never seen your true faces. How am I supposed to judge?" Although this sentence is easy to say, it is not pleasant to hear. Even if he admitted defeat, he had to identify 1 or 2 of them first. Since it was not right for him to admit defeat, it would be difficult for him to identify the culprit. Yun Yang's mind raced, but the first person he thought of was Ji Lingfeng. With Ji Lingxi's relationship and the sharp voice just now, perhaps he could start from there. He sighed and said, "Actually, this game isn't that difficult to play. Didn't I find out Big Brother's identity in an instant? It's so boring, so boring. My head is full of lumps now. I really don't have the mood to play this." The 6 of them sneered at him but did not speak. Once they did, they would not be fooled. As members of the 9 Supremes who did not know each other, how could it be so easy to trick us with this little bit of cleverness? Your words just now had ousted Big Brother. That was out of modesty. He didn't want you to lose too badly. Do you think we'll let you go so easily? Yun Zuyu, who was standing aside, asked, "I see that your cultivation base has improved tremendously and you're full of vigor. Why is your head full of lumps?" Yun Yang sighed and said, "Sister Yu, you don't know this, but my 8th brother Supreme Wind has left on his own, leaving behind a younger sister. Now his younger sister is pestering me every day. I'm going crazy. Not only is she bad-tempered, but she's also ugly. I only took her in for the sake of my 8th brother. I didn't want to be soft-hearted and get myself into big trouble." Yu Rulan, who was sitting beside Yun Zuyu, said coldly, "Yun Yang, what nonsense are you spouting?" Then a voice that sounded like it was about to explode rang out, "Brat, say it again." A young man suddenly shot forward like an arrow, like a ferocious tiger about to devour someone. Yun Yang said calmly, "How can I recognize my 8th brother if I don't say so? Supreme Wind." Supreme Wind's dashing figure halted at once, his face alternating between red and white as he grimaced in pain. He was still panting as he squinted and said, "Are you really just here to find me?" Yun Yang smiled apologetically. Of course. You have to know that Lingxi is my precious baby. If I wasn't forced into a corner, I wouldn't have said so." It was supposed to be a fawning remark, but Ji Lingfeng's expression turned even darker. He sat down and snorted, muttering, "A fresh flower stuck in cow dung, stained by cow dung. What bad luck." He then poured himself a goblet of wine and finished it. Yu Rulan had already regained her composure as she smiled and said, Good. Great young Master Yun's wisdom is indeed unique. When I meet younger sister Lingxi in the future, I'll have to have a good chat with her about great young Master Yun's wisdom and eloquence. Ji Lingfeng, who was standing aside, was elated to see his wife standing up for him. His annoyance vanished at once. Yun Yang, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. How could he not know that Yu Rulan was standing up for her man? She was also taking revenge on him for making irresponsible remarks. When it came to being close to Ji Lingxi, both Yun Yang and Ji Lingfeng had to stay behind. If his eighth sister-in-law were to casually criticize him, he would have to bear the consequences. Yun Yang quickly lowered his head and smiled apologetically, saying, "Eighth sister-in-law, you're a discerning person. You've seen how I treated you and Lingxi back then. I was forced into a corner by my unscrupulous brothers. Please be magnanimous and have mercy on me." Yu Rulan's face tightened before she broke into a smile. "Silly boy, I'll spare you." Yun Yang, who was embarrassed, shifted his gaze to the remaining 5 venerable lords. After observing them for a while, he said in a low voice, "The Bound of Universe's Lei family has been annihilated. The entire family is gone, there are no survivors. When I went over to kill them, I was annihilated immediately. However, I'd never thought that the Lei family's old forefather would be an unexpected figure whom no one could afford to offend." As he finished speaking, the expressions of the 5 people opposite him remained unchanged. However, Yun Yang had already pointed out accurately, "You're my 6th brother." Supreme Lightning. Supreme Lightning guffawed. "Good brother, good move." The matter of the Lei family had always been a knot in Supreme Lightning's heart. Yun Yang had pretended to be friends with Lei Dongtian of the Lei family back then, so he knew a lot about the Lei family. Supreme Lightning was from the Lei family after all. There was always a hint of a Lei family member in his features. In addition, when Yun Yang mentioned the end of the Lei family, there was a slight change in his gaze even though his expression did not change. It was not difficult to identify him. However, the next 4 people were not so easy to identify. Yun Yang was confident that he could identify Supreme Blood by provoking them verbally, but he did not want to use that method. After all, the death of old Duga's father was the most painful thing in Yun Yang's life. Whenever he thought about it, his heart would ache. How could he use it to his advantage? "I can't recognize the rest of the brothers. Pointing them out randomly will only spoil the fun of this game." Yun Yang admitted defeat, pouring himself 4 goblets of wine and downing them in 1 gulp at a time. He then guffawed. "Great, great." The brothers smiled at each other and did not say anything else. They sat down together and each of them had a goblet of wine. Supreme Gold, Supreme Wood, Supreme Blood, and Supreme Flame all took their seats. As they drank with him, it was Supreme Gold who said in annoyance, "How could you not recognize me, kid? I clearly gave you hints. Didn't you see such an obvious sword aura?" The others guffawed. After the joke, everyone began to drink again. How could they just drink half a goblet? Brothers, they had reunited today. Of course, they had to drink until they were drunk. This was probably the most enjoyable drink Yun Yang had ever had in his entire life. "Where have you all been all these years? Why, what is going on?" Yun Yang wanted to ask all these questions, but he could not bring himself to ask them when they were at the tip of his tongue. If he really asked, it would not be good. "I thought all of you were dead, but in the end, none of you died. I was the only one like a fool, fighting the world for all of you, risking my life for all of you, suffering all kinds of grievances for all of you, for all of you. In the end, all of you were fine and had even become almighty beings. I, on the other hand, was mediocre." Yun Yang did not want to say these words. However, it did not mean that the others would not speak of it either. 3 rounds of wine later. The lively atmosphere of conversation began to die down. Slowly, everyone stopped talking. After a while, Supreme Gold said in a low voice, "Xiao Jiu, there's something I need to tell you." Yun Yang looked up and said, "Second brother, please speak." Supreme Gold said, "We don't know the specifics of what happened back then. During the incident at Tianshan Cliff, we were really dead. This is not false at all. It was only later, at a certain point in time, that we suddenly regained consciousness. It was also at that point that we realized, or rather knew that we weren't actually dead. Well, it's not appropriate to put it this way. To be more accurate, our identities in Tianshan continent were already dead. However, to us, it was only an experience in the mortal world. It wasn't our complete selves." This sentence sounded very convoluted, as if it was entangled in the topic of death and immortality. The main point was unclear, but Yun Yang understood it. However, Yun Yang understood it. He understood it right away. At that time, after we confirmed that we were still alive, we turned to check on the situation of the others. Although no one was nearby, we who had awakened our true identity quickly gathered again, although not all of us were gathered together. Those who gathered again included your 8th brother, Supreme Wind, Ji Lingfeng. I, Supreme Gold Gujio, would like to talk to Supreme Wood. There was also your 5th brother, Supreme Flame. You still don't know your 5th brother's name, do you? His original name is Rue Huahua. The last one was your 7th brother, Supreme Blood. Thank you. I didn't make a mistake. Your 7th brother's name is Xia as in Xia. Even in such a heavy atmosphere, Yun Yang could not help coughing when he heard the words. This, Rue Huahua? Thank you? What a great name. It was thought-provoking and stirring. The reason we didn't truly perish and could still reunite is mainly because of our extraordinary origins. To put it bluntly, we have people behind us. They're all second-generation cultivators. As for the incident at Tianshan Cliff that day, it was because of the arrangement of an almighty being in the universe. However, there were some changes in the middle that caused the predetermined trajectory to be unbalanced. This so-called unbalance is probably the result of a few strong beings in the universe plotting against each other. The predetermined trajectories of the almighty beings, protecting and balancing each other, caused chaos in time and space, causing changes to occur on their own. The final outcome of the change was difficult for everyone's predetermined predictions. Well, it should be said that no one succeeded. Among them, Big Brother, Sister-in-law, and your 6th brother, Supreme Thunder, were the unluckiest. According to their original life trajectory, Big Brother should have established the 9 Supremes and Sister-in-law would have assisted him, eventually bringing peace to the world and ruling Tianxian, becoming the immortal legend of an empress. 6th, on the other hand, would have stayed dormant in the Tianxian continent for 100 years. After a series of fortuitous encounters, he would have returned to the bound of universe and personally annihilated the Lei family, making a name for himself and becoming the next leader of the Hall of Heroic Souls. However, because of the intervention of those almighty beings, their destinies were forcefully changed and their predetermined life trajectories were disrupted. Supreme Gold Gujio chuckled bitterly. When we knew the truth, we'd already returned to our physical bodies beyond the 9 heavens. Therefore we protested together, wanting to bring all of you up. Who would have thought that you'd become the only variable in this world? You'd have a far-reaching impact and you'd be heavily involved, so we couldn't touch you. On the other hand, reviving Big Brother, Sister-in-law, and 6th was nothing. However, after successfully reviving Big Brother, Sister-in-law, and 6th brother, we were all grounded without exception. The reason the adults gave me was that once we appeared, we'd greatly affect you. If you were affected, it'd affect the entire setup. You're already the last hope of the setup. There can't be any deviation. It's only today, when you've come this far, that we're finally allowed to come out and gather with you. However, we're only allowed to stay in the Supreme Heaven Pavilion and can't go out. Then, the Big Brother I've just become sworn brothers with. Yin Yang pondered. He's actually the original setup. Our fathers, on the other hand, are actually the disruptors. No one is considered a good person anyway, so it doesn't matter whether the setup was disruptive or not. Gujio chuckled and went straight to the point. Now, it seems that our father's disruption was successful. After all, you've been successfully preserved. According to the original plan, it should be the child you've helped just now, who will be the one to seize the providence of heaven and earth. Although it's somewhat regrettable and flawed, it's still considered a success. Yin Yang grinned. How else did they expect to succeed? You've already swapped out the main character, okay? What else did they want? There were still regrets and flaws. Yun Yang suddenly felt that his new sworn brother was very aggrieved. The setup that he'd painstakingly set up had been disrupted. The chosen person had been replaced. Helpless and unable to change anything, he could only find a junior to become sworn brothers with, lowering his status to make up for the flaw. It was truly a tragedy and unspeakable misery. That's not right. Yun Yang said, then, what about Sister Yu and Sister Lan? Who took them away back then? And the resources they've given me? The one who did it was one of our uncles, 4th Uncle Dong. He's been protecting you in the dark, leaving those things and traces to give you some clues, some hope. Otherwise, you'll be left with an eternal regret. That's a cultivation taboo, said Supreme Gold. I see. With Uncle Dong's help, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to. Speaking of this, Supreme Flame and Supreme Wind's faces were filled with a sorrowful sigh. Yun Zuiyu and Yu Rulan snorted in unison. What's wrong? Yin Yang asked curiously. Now, the knot in his heart, his worries, all of his burdens, were no longer a problem. Therefore he was unusually mischievous. As long as you say it, I'll believe it. The reason we were tortured down there was to test us, to see if we were qualified enough to enter their home. Yun Zuyu snorted, looking at Supreme Flame Rue Huahua. Supreme Flame said humbly, I didn't say this. I didn't mean it that way. If I hadn't sought death in the end, so you've done something? Yun Zuyu asked with a glare. No, it's all your hard work, wifey. Supreme Flame smiled apologetically. Father and mother said they wanted to take a look. I couldn't do anything about it. Why don't we go and make a fuss later? Yun Zuyu shrunk her neck. I'm not going. It's obviously because you're not determined enough. What does it have to do with father-in-law and mother-in-law? Supreme Flame grimaced. Yes, it's all my fault. Ji Lingfeng was also begging for mercy on the other side. I'm wrong. The group burst out in laughter. As the conversation continued, Yunyang found out that these fellows were originally engaged to each other. It was only when Supreme Flame and Supreme Wind's incident came out that the original engagement was called off, all of it at once. They were completely handed over to themselves to decide their own lives. They talked a lot and drank a lot of wine. Naturally, a lot of time had passed. Supreme Water then plucked up his courage and said, Xiaojiu, have you seen Bauer before? Yunyang's heart skipped a beat, but his expression did not change. He laughed and said, Bauer? Bauer is amazing now. Supreme Water was glowing as he asked, How so? Yunyang said, Bauer is now His Majesty the Empire of Yutong's Emperor. In this world all lands belong to the Emperor. Those who lead the land are the Emperor's servants. Overlooking the world, I'm the only one in power. Don't you think I'm amazing? Supreme Earth and Supreme Water looked at Yunyang in shock. Both of them had never thought that they would get such an answer. This is my eldest brother's throne. Of course, I want my nephew to sit on it. Yunyang said with a smile, the little fellow is very smart and is indeed made to be an emperor. He's the only heir to the throne of Yutong. I'm not the only one who believes this, His Majesty the old emperor also. It's because of his approval that Bauer can succeed the throne. Supreme Water was beaming as he raised his goblet and clinked it against Yunyang's. Xiaojiu, thank you very much. Holding his goblet, Yunyang asked casually, You guys probably have nothing to worry about now. You're probably freer than me. When you're free you can go and see for yourself. Bauer is doing very well now. The continent has long been unified and belongs to Yutong. Supreme Earth chuckled humorlessly and said, How can we appear in Yutong again? If we do, what will we be? Actually, we've only come here to meet you today and we're still in this state. In reality, we've already gone to another world. Supreme Water was a little disappointed as well as he said, I'm relieved to know that Bauer is safe. The cycle of life and death. Although the cause and effect cannot be concealed, this life and death has severed a lot after all. She sat in silence and suddenly tears rolled down her cheeks in a daze. How could a mother not miss her son? Even if she spoke with certainty, how could she bear it? Yunyang was relieved but his heart tightened at the same time. He did not know if what he had done was right, but he really did not want Supreme Earth and Supreme Water to see Bauer now and know what the Emperor of Yutong had done. If they knew what this child had done, would they not be extremely disappointed? Besides, many things had already happened and could no longer be undone. Chapter 1456. If it's just to see Bauer, it's not that difficult. Yunyang said with a smile, as long as we visualize the Empire of Yutong's capital, Tiantang City, with the aid of corresponding treasures, we should be able to lock onto the current scene of Tiantang's capital and fulfill big brother and sister-in-law's wish to see their son. Not bad. This is a good idea. If we can see Bauer once, it'll be enough. Supreme Earth and Supreme Water turned to look at their brothers, their faces filled with hope. Their cultivation base was already at an extremely high level, not below Yunyang's, but when it came to wealth, they could not compare to Supreme Gold and the other heirlooms. At the very least, they could not produce the treasures that Yunyang had mentioned. Yunyang smiled and winked at Supreme Gold, seemingly intentionally or unintentionally. Lord Gold, who was still wondering why Yunyang had touched on his sore spot, understood immediately and laughed. Big brother, I only know that both of you have been holding it in all these years, but it's a pity that we have no choice but to do so. Both of you can't go down to Tianxian to see your son, aren't we the same? Sigh. The others also had depressed expressions on their faces. Supreme Wind said, however, if the few of us were to reappear in Yutong, it'd be too shocking. The world would be in chaos. Besides, our reunion this time is all thanks to Supreme Heaven Pavilion's opportunity. Once Yunyang leaves the pavilion, this opportunity will end. It'll be impossible for us to go out personally. Supreme Earth said, Second brother, you're exaggerating. We've been together all these years, we've taken care of each other. There's nothing I can't do. It's just that your sister-in-law misses the child. It's best if I can take a look at him, but if I can't, then it's fine. Supreme Gold said, it's probably fate. Not long ago my father passed me a mystical arcane skill that can be used here. It's just that my cultivation base is still shallow and can't be used for too long. Perhaps I can only look after him for a while before I'll be powerless and unable to continue. Supreme Water said excitedly, as long as I can take a look, it'll be enough. Tears glistened in her eyes. Apparently, she was so excited by this pleasant surprise that she couldn't control herself. Her son. When he left home for the last time, he must have been only 5 or 6 years old. Such a young child, how did he survive all these years? How did he grow so big? Today he was the emperor of a nation, the sovereign of the continent, overlooking the world and suppressing the 4 seas. Gujio didn't waste any more words. He began to circulate his divine ability, and a misty ray of light immediately penetrated out. Everyone's gazes focused on it. It was a marvelous sight. The clear light pierced through the void and no one knew where it went. After a while, a ball of light suddenly appeared and slowly rotated. Then, for some reason, it turned into a picture. Everybody looked up and saw everything clearly. It was Yutong's palace. It was the site of the empire of Yutong's capital, Tiantang City, that everyone had not seen for a long time. The scene quickly stretched, and in an instant, it had already changed to the scene of the emperor attending morning court. Supreme Earth and Supreme Water straightened their backs at the same time, staring at the screen without blinking, afraid that they would miss the slightest detail. Although the image was clearly visible, as if it could be touched with one's hand, there was no sound, which was a fly in the ointment. In spite of this, Supreme Water's tears were streaming down her cheeks, her heart pounding. Sitting on the throne, the young emperor, who was overflowing with dominance, had 3 distinct black moles on his left eyebrow. It was the unique trait of her son. In the picture, the young emperor's gaze was authoritative, his actions domineering. His every word and action was filled with an aura of a sovereign overlooking the world. As he spoke, his gaze merely swept across the room, but the heavy emperor's aura could almost be felt through the picture. The officials bowed their heads, trembling in fear. In the solemn hall, there was only one main character, one voice. That was the emperor, dictating everything, the sole ruler of the world. Supreme Water stared unblinkingly at the picture, at the emperor on the other side. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Those were tears of joy, tears of a mother's pride and happiness. Finally, she could not hold it in any longer, leaning against Supreme Earth and sobbing softly. Even as she sobbed, her gaze was glued to the young emperor's face in the picture. At this moment, the young emperor seemed to be enraged, reprimanding something loudly. He held a memorial in his hand, pointing and shouting before slamming it on the table abruptly. Immediately, an official was seen kneeling down, kowtowing like he was pounding garlic as he pleaded. Then a golden palace guard came over and dragged the official out. Supreme Gold's face was pale as he said, "This young brother's cultivation base is shallow, I really can't take it anymore." Supreme Earth and Supreme Water did not say a word, still staring at the young emperor's face in the picture. They looked at him longingly, sighing softly. "Take it," Supreme Earth said. Just as he uttered a word, Supreme Gold's face turned unusually pale and the picture disappeared. Supreme Wood, who was beside him, seemed to be prepared. He grabbed a bunch of medicinal pills and tossed them into Supreme Gold's mouth, focusing on recuperating. Supreme Earth's expression was rather blank while Supreme Water's face was covered in tears. Yun Zuyu and Yu Rulan comforted her from the side. "Don't be sad, sister-in-law. The child is so promising, becoming the emperor that unites Tianshan throughout the ages, the legend of the emperor. Just look at his domineering aura and imperial demeanor. It's something to be congratulated and comforted. We can't wait to be envious. Why is sister-in-law crying?" That's right. I'm not crying. I'm happy." Supreme Water was sobbing as she wiped her tears. She said she was crying tears of joy, but no one knew that the motherly heart was actually grieving for not being able to see her beloved son again. For a moment, everyone present was quiet, or at least they appeared to be quiet. The young emperor in the picture made everyone feel emotional. Wise and mighty, domineering and unparalleled, he controlled the universe with ease. This was indeed the aura of a peerless overlord, genuine and genuine. This was the original intention of the 9 Supremes. However, Bauer, a child who had been placed in a remote village since he was young, how did he train to where he was today? Everyone's gaze was focused on Yun Yang. No one was around then, only Yun Yang was there. He was the only one who cared about the child, who had brought him out, trained him, fought for the throne, and protected the child in the face of countless open and hidden attacks. Yet, how much hard work had he gone through to get to where he was today? The immense effort, the level of mental and physical exertion, the meticulous planning, it was something that no one could imagine. Furthermore, Yunyang did not have his current formidable cultivation base or pinnacle combat power back then. He had only been in an unusually dangerous situation. His brothers had all died in battle, the enemy was strange and unbeatable. He had to seek revenge, protect his family and country, go to the battlefield, go against the martial world forces in the dark, and take care of the child that his eldest brother did not entrust to him, but he had to do so. All of these had been completed in a few short years. Thinking about it, everyone could not help but suck in a sharp breath. How did Yunyang do it? Supreme Earth and Supreme Water exchanged a look and stood up at the same time, raising their goblets. Supreme Water spoke, "Ninth brother. Your eldest brother and I won't say anything more. We're brothers, ninth brother." She could not continue, her face flushed with excitement. Pulling her husband's hand, she raised her goblet and downed it. Yunyang stood up hurriedly and downed the wine in his cup with a half bow. He said respectfully, "Fourth sister, please don't put all the credit on me. The others have also contributed greatly. Bao, being able to reach where he is today is mostly because he was born to be an emperor. All of you have seen it just now. There are some things that can't be cultivated just by nurturing." Supreme Earth and Supreme Water looked at each other and smiled, not refuting what he had said. How could they not know that? Yunyang's words were reasonable, but if it were not for his help, so what if he was an emperor? Even though the brothers did not have to talk about it, they had to remember it in their hearts. The others stood up as well. Gujio said, "Xiaojio, we would like to toast you as well. This cup is what you should drink. No one is more qualified than you to enjoy this toast." Supreme Gold, Supreme Flame, Supreme Wind, Supreme Thunder and the rest raised their goblets and drained them in one go. Their gazes on Yunyang were filled with praise and comfort. If it were anyone else sitting in Yunyang's position, they would not dare to boast that they could do better than him. After his brothers left, Yunyang had fought alone. To be able to get to where he was now was already an answer sheet that was even more perfect than perfection. Yunyang chuckled bitterly. The change had come too fast and too ruthlessly. He had persevered and walked step by step to where he was today because he did not have a long-term plan. It was more because he did not want to give up, he did not want all his brothers' efforts to go down the drain. He had decided to take things one step at a time. Everything before him was perfect in everyone's eyes, but when he thought about how Bao Er's current situation had long deviated from the trajectory he had originally planned, Yunyang's heart raced. After some thought, Yunyang said, "Speaking of Bao Er, this child, he is indeed born to be an emperor. If His Majesty the old emperor hadn't recognized this, he wouldn't have kept him by his side so early. Being the crown prince is an innate gift, not one that can be taught by a later generation. He has his own understanding of the art of being an emperor, the art of trickery, the art of balance, and even the art of darkness. Now that he has become the emperor of the Empire of Yutong, this young brother is naturally happy. However, the only flaw is that Bao Er's desire for power and control is a little too strong." He looked at Supreme Earth sincerely and said, "This young brother really doesn't dare to claim credit for not teaching the child well. I can only feel ashamed." Supreme Earth laughed and said, "Xiaojio, do you think I don't know what you're worried about? The art of being an emperor is a compulsory course for the successor of the royal family. Wasn't your big brother also the crown prince back then?" Although it was only a glimpse just now, the old faces in the imperial court were all gone, replaced by new and unfamiliar faces. This has already explained a lot. Bao Er's domineering aura, overbearing yet lacking in the way of an emperor, it only proves that my hunch is correct. He stopped laughing and sucked in a soft breath, saying, "Xiaojio, we're brothers. I understand your character and I know the personality of the descendant you're looking forward to. However, there's a saying that goes well, the children and grandchildren have their own blessings. It's Bao Er's luck and destiny that he can come this far and control the world. We're very satisfied. No matter how he is or what his future will be like as his uncle, you've already done too much to pave the way for him. From now on, even if that child causes the wrath of the heavens and the people, or if he acts perversely and cruelly, it's the path he's chosen. In the Tianshan continent, the world is united and the seas are at peace. It's the best that this world is guarded by an emperor throughout the ages, but it's really only our ideal. The reality is different. It's all fate and destiny." Supreme Earth laughed heartily and said, "Xiaojio, as your elder brother, I'd like to thank you once again. I can't say anything else. Your sister-in-law and I are already satisfied to be able to take a look at this scene today. We have no more regrets. We can't see the child's future and we won't interfere. Yunyang heaved a sigh of relief. Big brother, it's great that you can think this way. Supreme Water wiped away her tears and said, this child, when he was young, your big brother said that he's a little cold by nature and has a strong desire to control. We understand the unfinished meaning in your words. She rubbed her eyes and said, because both of us aren't always by the child's side, he's been willful since he was young. In addition, there's no one to control him. This willfulness is even more severe. His possessiveness and desire to control are extremely strong. I still remember that time when I brought back a few toys and said that I'd share them with the children in the village tomorrow. Bao picked one first. However, he woke up in the middle of the night and smashed the rest. Your big brother and I beat the child up, but we didn't pursue the matter further. Since then, we didn't have many chances to meet each other. However, the child's nature was on full display. It said that he grows old when he's 3 years old. The old saying isn't a lie. Now that I think about it, it was right and wrong for us to hide him in the mountain village that day. Keeping him hidden all year round was out of consideration for his safety, but we neglected that when he came out of the mountain village, he had already developed a sense of inferiority and sensitivity. Even after he became the emperor, he still had it. Therefore, he didn't allow other voices in the imperial court and officials he couldn't control. He didn't allow anyone in the imperial court who could reprimand him or obstruct him at any time. I've thought of this when I saw the scene. I only hope that the bosses didn't die because of him. Supreme Water said softly, this is all Bauer's fault. If he really did kill the bosses, then we, husband and wife, will definitely give them an explanation. Yunyang shook his head and said, the bosses aren't dead. I've arranged a very safe place for them to spend their remaining years in peace. You don't have to worry about this. As he spoke, he gave a detailed explanation of his arrangements. Supreme Earth and Supreme Water heaved a long sigh of relief after listening to him. That's good, that's good. Their children would have their own blessings. Seeing Bao and knowing of Yunyang's arrangements, Supreme Earth and Supreme Water finally felt relieved and were in high spirits again. Brothers, where have you been all this time? Yunyang began to ask. We've been roaming around in the boss realm. We haven't gone anywhere during this period of time. Of course, we've gone to other realms to train occasionally. Gujio coughed. Boss realm? Yunyang looked at Supreme Earth. Not the boss Supreme Earth, we're talking about the other boss. Gujio said, wait for you, cough cough, wait for you to break through the starry sky and see your true nature. Then you'll be able to see this boss. To be honest, you're actually this boss's cousin. Chapter 1457. Biological cousin? Are you serious about it? Yunyang was taken aback, immediately recalling his mysterious aunt, as his imagination ran wild. My aunt's son? Cough cough. Supreme Mu's face was pained as he said, Little Nine, you have to hurry up. I know it's unreasonable for us to ask you like this. You've already worked very hard and your progress is faster than anyone else's. If it were any of us, we wouldn't be able to do better than you, but it's been during this time that boss thinks our progress is too slow. Every time we see him, he'll beat us up. Even second brother is beaten until his face is covered in dirt, fat and swollen. We can only place our hopes on you. We hope that you'll master your skills and avenge us. Yunyang was stunned again. That boss beat all of you? What? Based on what? After a pause, he asked in surprise, could it be that so many of you couldn't defeat him even if you joined hands? Everyone nodded with a troubled expression. Our new boss only left Supreme Earth and his wife some face. He didn't really go all out, but the few of us were crippled every time, Tangio complained as he lifted Supreme Flame's clothes. Look at your fifth brother. Boss heard that Rue Huohua isn't afraid of fire, so he caught him as an experiment and threw him into the starry flame. He almost burned Rue Huohua to ashes. Yunyang looked over and saw that there was indeed a large burn mark on Supreme Flame's back, almost taking up his entire back. Yun Zuyu snorted and said, just talking about it pisses me off. If I hadn't arrived in time and fought with your boss without a care for my reputation, your poor fifth brother would have been burned to the core before he was released. That's too cruel. These brothers of yours are even worse. None of them pleaded for mercy. Yun Zuyu was full of resentment as she spoke of this. We can't do anything about it. Ji Lingfeng pursed his lips and said, Boss hates it when people call him by his pet name. Not only did your husband call him that day, he didn't stop. The first and second time, Boss tolerated it for your sake, but this fellow got addicted to it the entire night. Whenever he talks to boss, he calls him by his pet name. I'd be surprised if boss didn't flip out. Did he change his mind? Ha ha ha. Everyone guffawed. Supreme Earth and Supreme Water smiled as well. He exchanged a glance with the Lightning Seigneur. Speaking of which, the three of them did not show it on their faces, but they all felt powerless in their hearts. When they weren't with the big brother, the brothers were happy and harmonious. They were a family without any barriers. However, as long as they interacted with their boss, the three of them could immediately feel that something was amiss. Gujiu discussed with him Rui Huohua, Ji Lingfeng, Xie and the others. They are all one with that boss. It was an inseparable whole, so naturally there was an element of exclusion. No matter what, outsiders would not be able to blend in. Even the three of them were no exception. It was a kind of ultimate tacit understanding that had been cultivated over a long period of time, or even millions of years. They could chat and laugh with him, talking about anything and everything. However, he would always have a feeling in his heart that he was thousands of miles away from that group. But this kind of thing was absolutely impossible to say out loud. After a bout of laughter, the group began to eat quietly and talk about their encounters. Naturally, Yunyang was the one who spoke the most. Even when he did not want to speak, the others would continue to ask questions, as if they were trying to make up for the few years they had not seen each other. Coincidentally, Ji Lingfeng asked in his drunken state, Yunyang, you and my sister, how far have you come? It would have been better if he had not mentioned it. Once he did, Yunyang was depressed. Eighth brother, can you not mention this? My chest hurts when I mention it. Yunyang raised his cup and drank, drowning his sorrows. Tell us quickly. Let us be happy. The brothers were interested to see Yunyang like this. Don't mention it. Yunyang said with a pained expression. I don't know what kind of restriction your father has cast on Lingxi. I'm already at the level of a saint now, but I still can't even touch it. Even when I accidentally touch it, there's a flash of white light that beats me half to death. Finding a wife in your family is simply the greatest misfortune of 8 lifetimes. Normally, when people look for a wife, they would at most ask for more betrothal gifts. What you are doing is basically buying people's lives. This is only me. If it was someone else, even if they had 100 lives, it would still not be enough to kill them. Yunyang held his wine cup and said in melancholy, She's my wife. All the procedures have been completed, but I still can't touch her or touch her. What do you think this is? Ha! The brothers pounded on the table and guffawed. They were overjoyed and happy. Ji Lingfeng was stunned, holding his wine cup. After a while he stuttered, You still want to touch her? I'll beat you to death. Having said that, he could no longer keep a straight face as he burst out laughing, clutching his stomach. Supreme Blood held his stomach with one hand and hugged Yunyang's shoulder with the other, saying, Keep it up, brother. You'll get what you want one day. Keep it up, keep it up. He guffawed after that. After a while he said, When his cultivation base surpasses Uncle G, it should be enough, ha ha. The brothers looked at him sympathetically. Yunyang snorted and said, Is it difficult to surpass his cultivation base? It shouldn't be. The group said in unison, It's not. It's not. It's not difficult at all. Following that, the entire hall burst into laughter. Based on your current cultivation progress, you'll have at most another 18,000 years, that's about it. Gujiu held back his laughter and said, If your father-in-law is lazy during this period of time and doesn't make any progress at all. Yunyang's eyes widened when he heard that, feeling deflated. Doesn't that mean that I have a wife and I have to be a bachelor for the rest of my life? Yunyang had never expected that the reunion that was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a joyous and exhilarating event, would end in utter gloom in the end. However, Yunyang still felt a heartfelt reluctance when they parted. When will all of you come to see me again? It shouldn't be too long. This still depends on you. Gujiu patted Yunyang's shoulder and said, Work hard on your cultivation base. The faster your cultivation base improves, the nearer the day we meet again. Work hard, young man. The brothers stood in a row watching Yunyang leave. Yunyang stood on the opposite side. He knew that he had to leave, but he could not bear to leave just like that. For so many years he had yearned for this day to come. Now that such a day had really come, he was even more reluctant to part ways. The brothers' mood was obviously heavy as well, but no one showed it on their faces. The walls of Supreme Heaven Pavilion turned from solid to illusory, about to disappear. Xie suddenly flashed to Yunyang's side, speaking quickly, Remember, don't be too ruthless. Before Yunyang could understand what he meant, he felt the world spinning around him and his mind becoming muddled. Suddenly, a dazzling white light flashed. Then he floated into the air, his eyes filled with white clouds and blue sky. Supreme Earth, Gold Venerable, and the others had long disappeared. Yun Yang, who had left Supreme Heaven Pavilion and returned to the bound of universe, was at ease. He regained his composure in an instant as he spun in the air and descended, following the wind and clouds. The vast sky seemed to have become a playground for him alone. There was no other reason for Yun Yang's loss of composure. He was simply too happy. Once his dream came true, the knot in his heart was gone and his state of mind was no longer clouded. His cultivation base and ability had improved tremendously once again. Yun Yang even wanted to sing a song to express his joy. The remaining demonic seal on Yun Yang had been broken. He could now use all the divine powers that had been difficult for him to use freely as he pleased. Whether it was summoning the wind and clouds or finding thunder and lightning, everything was as he wished. How could he not be ecstatic to be able to transform into the wind and clouds and soar through the 9 heavens after a long time? With a sweep of his divine sense, Yun Yang saw half of the bound of universe. Should I capture Dongfang Haoran and the other 2 old fellows and beat them up? Yun Yang suddenly had this strange idea. It was probably because he had been extorted too much by these fellows previously. Supreme Yun had always repaid kindness with kindness and enmity with vengeance. A gentleman's revenge was never too late. He then thought, this lowly one's revenge is from morning till night. Should I take my revenge without restraint? Thinking about it, Yun Yang eventually gave up on this tempting idea that would make him feel so happy. I'll think about it later. I'll think about it when I'm sure I can bully you all. Yun Yang still felt that it was not very safe. Even though his ability had improved a lot after this trip to the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, Yun Yang was confident that he could kill any one of the 3 rulers if it was a battle of life and death without the risk of dying himself. However, when it came to sparring, Yun Yang was not very confident. Putting aside the profound cultivation base that these old men had accumulated over the years, their cunning and shamelessness alone would definitely allow them to fight 3 against 1. They would even be able to do it easily and effortlessly. If Yun Yang really wanted to flaunt his prowess, he would probably be suppressed by the 3 old fellows together. Not only that, he would also be extorted for a lot of good stuff. After all, Yun Yang's chi of vitality was a supreme treasure of creation. It was not enough for the 3 old fellows no matter how much he had. Although Yun Yang had gained a lot from this trip to the Supreme Heaven Pavilion and reunited with his brothers, he was overjoyed and proud. After a period of exhilaration, he gradually calmed himself down and transformed into an ordinary scholar, heading towards the Palace of 9 Supremes. The bound of universe's martial world was still chaotic. Battles were still happening everywhere, but these were not worth mentioning in Yun Yang's eyes. After all, compared to the martial world he had imagined, this was much more orderly. It could even be said that the martial world of the bound of universe was much more orderly than the martial world of Tianxian continent. In an orderly Jianghu, even if countless practitioners have the ability to destroy mountains and break seas, they rarely abuse their power. This is a great blessing. Yun Yang smiled inwardly. As his cultivation base increased and his horizons widened, he was more and more impressed by the almighty being who had created the bound of universe. As the saying went, the imperial court had laws, the martial world had its principles. It was easy to formulate and even promote the imperial court's laws. After all, they were dealing with ordinary people, and the state was usually successful in this aspect. However, when it came to the principles of the martial world, it was extremely difficult to make all the martial world people follow the conventions. However, this almighty being did not care about this. He did not care about anything, he just cut off the root of the problem. There was no need to explain his iron-fisted methods. If he said no, then no. When one's ability has reached such a level, there's indeed no need for reason. This is what it means to have a bigger fist and reason. Yin Yang thought to himself. Occasionally he would look at the changes in his meridians and mystical chi. It was like a dazzling galaxy, a myriad of phenomena. It was no longer in the form of strands of chi in the past, but more like glowing stars that were connected in his meridians. Perhaps this is the true meaning of the saying that the human body forms its own universe. As long as I continue to develop and evolve it step by step, it won't be a rare thing when I form my own heaven and earth. Yin Yang did not move very quickly. He wanted to look at the world from a third party's point of view, so he strolled leisurely. At the same time, he was thinking about his own matters, combing through his gains during this period of time. Along the way, he had met many disciples of the Palace of 9 Supremes. Each of them was in high spirits, dressed in fresh clothes and galloping on horses. Why are there so many disciples of the Palace of Nine Supremes in the martial world now? Yun Yang extended his deific consciousness and could not help being astonished. I've actually stayed in the Supreme Heaven Pavilion for more than a year and a half? No wonder my state of mind has changed. Forget it, I'd better hurry back and take a look first. The bound of universe seemed peaceful, but in fact, there were turbulent waves hidden within this tranquility. The Blood Soul Mountain was the ultimate battle against the demon race. This battle had been announced to the entire bound of universe, and the pre-war mobilization had begun. The decisive battle between the human race and the demon race was a battle of destiny. The winner would occupy the bound of universe. The loser would become food or prey. The survival of the fittest, the severe consequences of survival and death, weighed heavily on the hearts of the ordinary people in the bound of universe. The consequences of losing the battle were unimaginable. Countless martial artists in the martial world responded to the call and marched towards the Blood Soul Mountain. The people from all directions were like rivers flowing into the sea. Those whose cultivation base is below the saint level, don't join in the fun. You'll just die in vain if you go. You're not even cannon fodder. The war between the two realms is about to begin. This is a battle of life and death. If we lose this war, the human race will die without a burial ground. This is a battle of race survival. How can we not give it our all? The entire bound of universe was filled with such slogans. Countless people were talking about it. Some were worried, some were in high spirits, and some were uneasy. Overall, the pre-war mobilization of the three heavenly palaces was quite successful. Yun Yang looked at the Blood Soul Mountain's entrance from afar, only to see a cloud of blood chi rising and clamoring. The demon race is also making the best use of their time to prepare for the war. I wonder how the two elder brothers, the Fox Emperor and the Cat Emperor, are doing. Yun Yang moved and disappeared from where he was. The Palace of Nine Supremes sent out a summons. All disciples who were outside were summoned back to the mountain. Other than those who were stationed at the Blood Soul Mountain, the rest had to return to the sect within a month. During this period of time, due to the cultivation of the many spiritual herbs gifted by the deities, the first round of profits had been achieved. It was not an exaggeration to say that the medicinal pills refined by Emmy were plentiful. There were piles and piles of them everywhere. Yun Yang naturally wanted to use them to improve the sect's ability. This time, not only the disciples of the Palace of Nine Supremes, he had also informed Dongfang Haoren and the others. He had prepared a generous gift for each of them. The war is about to break out. The Palace of Nine Supremes is giving the men of the bound of universe a boost with mere medicinal pills. Yun Yang had also sent some to the other sects, such as the Sacred Heart Palace and the Sacred Soul Palace. These are the medicinal pills from the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, and the quantity is not small. Why don't we share some of them so that the higher-ups can be stronger and have a higher chance of winning the war in the future? This was Yun Yang's excuse. An entire warehouse of medicinal pills had been distributed. The crowd's morale soared and their morale soared. Only Chen Duoduo and Gu Chaoyang could not speak, their hearts aching so much that they were bleeding. Medicinal pills had always been the highest quality item in the Bound of Universe's trading market. What was more, the ones that Yun Yang had given out were all supreme-grade medicinal pills that could increase one's cultivation base, nourish one's spirit, revive one's soul, and prolong one's life. Such medicinal pills could no longer be measured by money. They were resources that could supply a super force like the Palace of Nine Supremes for 10,000 years. Just like that, they were sent out by the sect leader with a wave of his hand. Gone. As for the excuse, no matter how impassioned and passionate he was, it was still just an excuse. Of course, Dongfang Haoren and the others understood very well that Yun Yang was implying that he would only do this once and not again. No matter how much you need them in the future, I won't take them out. After you take these resources back, how to distribute them and what to say to your subordinates is all your business. It has nothing to do with me, and I shall not be dragged into this matter. This batch of supreme-grade medicinal pills is a timely help. Dongfang Haoren was so happy that he could not close his mouth. I was just worrying about the lack of high-end combat power. I didn't expect so many supreme-grade medicinal pills to come. From what I see, this batch of medicinal pills is enough to advance our overall ability by 20%, no more, no less. 20%. Only more, no less. Dongfang Haoren was talking about the Supreme Saint, 20% of the experts above the level of a saint. It was a clear indication of the majestic effect of this batch of medicinal pills. It was simply nature-defying. With this improvement of at least 20%, the human tribe's chances of winning in the final battle had increased by 30%. Even so, we still can't be careless. The humans have always had the upper hand, not because of their superior abilities, but because the demon race can only send a few people over. No matter how many experts they have, it's useless. As the saying goes, one man can hold the pass against 10,000 men. This is the best example. Now, the heaven and earth's energy has fluctuated more frequently and violently recently. The demon race must have thought of something regarding this. The frequency of their attacks has increased as well. In this half a year, they've attacked thousands of times at each pass. It seems like they're testing something. Shiman Fangfu said, once there's any change, our defense line will probably collapse for miles, and there will be trouble in the future. It's a pity that we have no idea what's going on over there. How could there be such a change in the chi of energy? The internal conflict between the Fox Emperor and the Cat Ancestor hasn't been quelled yet. If the Demon Emperor acts so recklessly, isn't it starting a war on both sides? We'll be attacked from both sides. Beigong Liuli frowned and said, could it be that the Phoenix Emperor has other plans? Yunyang was taken aback. The Phoenix Emperor is the only one who can cause such a huge commotion without making a sound. Once the demon race's strategy against the human race is effective, the all-out battle between both sides will happen in an instant. There will be no more room for maneuver. In fact, this is also the main reason I've taken out these medicinal pills, Yunyang said faintly. Comparing the safety of the entire human race to a secret, which one is more important? You know what's more important. Everyone go back quickly now that you've gotten them. Give them to your people as soon as possible. Although the person who takes the medicine has an increase in ability, he still needs to familiarize himself with the sudden increase in cultivation base. It's better to take it as soon as possible. Time is of the utmost importance to us now, we can't waste it. Dongfang Haoren looked at Yunyang deeply and said, understood. Everyone, these are the medicinal pills from the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. This is the only batch. Please be careful when you use them, don't waste them. The others nodded solemnly. Then they turned into streams of light and disappeared before Yunyang's eyes. Under the watchful eyes of Ji Lingxi and the others, Yunyang waved his hand. The Palace of Nine Supremes resource warehouse was suddenly filled with weapons, each of them a mystical weapon. For a moment, the room was filled with radiant colors. Disciples with a cultivation base of Saint Lord and above, one for each of you. Chen Duo exclaimed in shock, almost fainting. It was not that he had never seen mystical weapons before. From the residence of Nine Supremes to the Palace of Nine Supremes, any mystical weapon that was bestowed had to go through Majordomo Chen's eyes first. In other words, in the entire Palace of Nine Supremes, there was no one else but Majordomo Chen who had seen the most mystical weapons. Even so, Chen Duo was still in disbelief when he saw so many mystical weapons in front of him. This time boss was really too generous. He was generous to outsiders and even more so to his own family. However, the main reason that surprised Chen Duo was that he knew Yunyang very well. If Yunyang had been a miser, Chen Duo would have thought that it was appropriate, but when a miser suddenly tossed out all his treasures, something big must have happened. Boss, what are you doing? Chen Duo asked, trembling. Nothing. Yunyang smiled. Little fatty, just do what you need to do. You don't have to worry about anything else. Before his words echoed in the air, he had already left, dragging Shangguan Lingxiu and Ji Lingxi with him. Ji Lingxi and Shangguan Lingxi could not help chuckling when they saw little fatty's dispirited expression. Perhaps only the two of them knew what Yunyang was thinking. Yunyang's move was to add the last layer of foundation to the Palace of Nine Supremes. After this war, Yunyang would probably leave this world and the two of them would definitely follow him. By then, the Palace of Nine Supremes would be the legacy that Yunyang would leave in this world, passing down the torch. Naturally, he had to plan for its continuation. Yunyang, your ability should be close to the level of Saint Perfection now, right? Ji Lingxi said, if you win this war, your cultivation base will go up another level and surpass the pinnacle of this world. By then, this world won't be able to contain you and me anymore, just like when we were in Tianshan continent. However, don't forget something. You have to complete it before you leave. What is it? Yunyang asked in surprise. Yunyang had always prided himself on being able to foresee everything, but he did not expect to be reminded by the person beside him today that he had forgotten something. How could he not be surprised? About Dugucho. Ji Lingxi said, Dugucho helped you back then because he was persuaded by Ling Xiaozue. Half of it was because of his deceased wife. Do you think there's any way to solve this? Yunyang was stunned. Dugucho. He had long been a guest in heaven, half a step into the ethereal realm. But for the sake of his lover he was too late. Dugucho. When his wife had passed away from illness, he had used Tianshan continent's 10,000-year-old mystical ice jade as the material to make a coffin. His obsession had not changed for decades. All he wanted was to be in love with his wife until their hair turned white, but he could not do it. His greatest wish in life was to resurrect his wife. Dugucho. Yunyang frowned and said, "Even for me today, it's still beyond my power to bring the dead back to life. However, it's not like I can't find another way. There's only one thing that I can't do. Does he still have his wife's soul? If he does, there might be a turning point in this matter." Ji Lingxi smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about this. He's much more attentive than you are." Although the long years of wear and tear on the Tianshan continent had caused much of his wife's soul to dissipate, you gave him the ethereal amethyst before your ascension. He did not use it on himself, but turned it into a vessel to store his wife's soul instead. Actually, it's not just the soul. Even his wife's body is well preserved. It's in the mystical ice jade coffin, vivid and lifelike just like when she was alive. Actually, Dugucho used the mystical ice jade to preserve a sliver of his wife's life force in her body back then. However, after so many years, the life force is long gone, leaving only her soul behind. Shengguan Lingxiu added. Cough. Yunyang waved his hands and said, "I won't lie to you. His wife's physical body can't be used anymore. Ask Dugucho to come, let me give it a try. How can I break the promise I made back then?" If it had been before the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, Yunyang would not have been able to do it even if he had attained the ability of a saint. However, after this encounter at the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, it was a different story. Even if Yunyang still could not do it, his best ally, the concourse of the underworld, would be able to take care of this matter. After a year and a half, the concourse of the underworld had basically perfected the underworld. Even if it was a soul that had passed away a long time ago, as long as the soul was still around, there was still a chance. A moment later, Dugucho dashed in, his face filled with excitement. "Lord Supreme Cloud." He stuttered for a long time, his face flushed with anxiety, unable to speak. Suddenly he fell to his knees and kowtowed. Dugucho, who had already attained the level of a demigod, kowtowed to Yunyang without a care for his image or dignity. "What are you doing?" Yunyang helped him up quickly and said, "Dugu, you have to think about this carefully. I promise that I'll do my best, so of course I'll do my best, but I'm not 100% sure. More importantly, even if I can resurrect your wife, her physical body can't be used anymore. She needs to be reconstructed. You should understand the difference." Dugucho nodded repeatedly, panting heavily. He felt like he was suffocating. Other than nodding, he could not utter another word. Ling Xiaozue had rushed over after hearing the news as well. He looked relieved, obviously happy for Dugucho from the bottom of his heart. Ever since they had helped Yunyang that day, the two brothers had basically never been separated. Their bond was closer than that of biological brothers. It was also because of this that Ling Xiaozue could empathize with Dugucho's regret more than anyone else. Yunyang wasted no time, immediately burning incense to summon King Yama. Not long after, a cloud of ghastly fog billowed in the hall with a dull thud. King Yama had arrived in person. "What's the matter, summoning you in such a hurry?" King Yama scratched his head and greeted, "Ling Xiaozue, Dugucho, you two aren't dead yet?" Both of them were exasperated. Concourse of the Underworld's King Yama was an old acquaintance in Tianxian. In terms of status and identity, he was almost on par with them. Even if his master, Earth Treasury, were to come personally, he would not dare to be careless in front of both of them. Who would have thought that he would be so arrogant when they met again today? "Nothing much. I just want you to take a look at Dugucho's wife's soul and see if it can still be used. If it can be used, help to resurrect her. That's all." Yunyang was nonchalant, his tone casual. King Yama was shocked. "Lord Supreme Cloud, you're not joking, are you? Dugucho's wife has been dead for so many years, and a remnant of her soul still remains? Even if a remnant of her soul remains, how can it be so easy to resurrect her?" As he spoke, his face grew increasingly contorted. "Although the underworld has been successfully rebooted, we haven't officially opened for business yet. It doesn't make sense for us to start a losing business the moment we open for business. Just tell me if you're going to help or not." Yunyang said with a smile, his face filled with kindness. "Yes." King Yama gritted his teeth. "You, Lord Supreme Cloud, I'll help if I can, I won't help if I can't. But I have to think of a way to turn things around." King Yama examined the soul carefully and said after a moment of contemplation, "Although this soul has dissipated due to being in this world for a long time, the true spirit is still there. It looks like old Dugu has consulted an expert and made the appropriate arrangements. But does this remnant of the soul have to bring along her previous life's memory to be resurrected? Or does she have to start all over again? Yunyang said, nonsense. Of course she has to be resurrected with her memory. I'll send her straight into the cycle of reincarnation if she starts all over again. Why would I need you? King Yama's expression grew even more pained as he said, everything else is fine. To resurrect a remnant of the soul, especially to retain her original memory, she'll need at least 9 flower of the other shore and a part of the road to hell. When she turns back from the home viewing platform, I'll just push her back. These are all fine, but the other problem is, if you want her to be resurrected with her memory intact, you'll need a body to rely on, won't you? What about her body? I'll make it clear that her original body can't be used. It's been sealed by the mystical ice jade for so many years, it'll definitely dissipate once it's unfrozen. Does it have to be a human body? Yunyang frowned. It's possible to possess a human body, but if it's possible, it's best not to do so, because it'll be a huge hidden danger. Dugucho has already advanced to a half-saint, and it's only by chance that he'll advance a step further. The fundamental purpose of resurrecting his wife is to stay together with each other. However, even if those who walk the path of possession are reborn successfully and even cultivate the martial path again, it'll still be difficult for them to go too far. This is because possession is ultimately against nature. No matter how compatible the target's physical body is, it'll never be able to merge perfectly with the original body. If it's possible, it'll be best to reconstruct the physical body with treasures of heaven and earth. However, treasures of heaven and earth that can reconstruct the physical body can only be obtained with great luck. They're too rare, said King Yama. Yunyang frowned without saying a word, but his deific consciousness was actually talking to Emmy. Emmy, what treasures of heaven and earth can bear the greatest burden of a human soul? Can the soul be attached to it and be no different from a normal person? Aya. Emmy's soft voice was tinged with doubt. Yunyang perked up and explained in detail how he wanted to fulfill his promise to Dugucho. Aya. Emmy waved its arms and legs, looking very interested. Its vines waved for a while before 7 to 8 stalks of medicinal herbs were delivered to Yunyang. King Yama, after some consideration, I plan to use the 10,000-year-old humanoid Chinese knotweed as the body, the 10,000-year-old 9 earthly soul ginseng as the 5 organs, the 10,000-year-old emperor essence as the meridians, and the essence of the 10,000-year-old blood vine as the blood vessels. The flesh and bones will be the 10,000-year-old ice jade Ganoderma and frost essence snow soul, which can complement each other. As for the head, I plan to use the 10,000-year-old spiritual jade snow ginseng as the material. It should fit perfectly with the body, and the facial organs will be complemented by the 10,000-year-old spiritual amber. As for the soul, I don't have a better choice, so I plan to reconstruct it with the essence of a 100,000-year-old plant. What do you think? These are all of the snow attribute. There won't be any conflict. Yunyang asked King Yama humbly. After all, it was only Emmy's opinion. King Yama was the expert. Unexpectedly, King Yama was dumbfounded when he heard Yunyang's suggestion. This is too extravagant. Too extravagant. It was one thing to use the 10,000-year-old humanoid Chinese knotweed as the body, but the 9 earthly soul ginseng, the emperor essence snow ginseng, the blood vine, the spiritual jade snow ginseng, the spiritual amber, and the ice jade Ganoderma. Any one of these items only existed in legends. Even a supreme saint cultivator would not be able to see such superb spiritual herbs more than a few times in his life. Yet you still want to fill in the prefix that all of them are 10,000-year-old. Are you trying to shock me to death? The most infuriating thing is still the last 100,000-year-old plant essence. It's not difficult for flowers and plants to transform into Tao, but it's extremely difficult to condense them into spirit essences. You're talking about the 100,000-year-old plant essence right off the bat, and you're asking me if I can do it? I want to say no, but I can't get past my heart. If you really have these items, reconstruct the body of that lady. Once she's resurrected, she'll be a pinnacle expert. Given time, the position of a saint will be within reach. King Yanluo sighed, but there are 2 sides to this. It is precisely because the treasure that it uses to shape it is too precious. After it is resurrected, as all the elixirs fuse together, the person involved will become a moving treasure of heaven and earth. I believe there will be many people who have their eyes on it. King Yama chuckled. That would truly be the case. A drop of blood can grant one immortality, a piece of flesh can allow one to ascend, and even a mouthful of saliva is the nectar of life. It's hard for any cultivator not to be tempted. No? No problem. I'll ensure her safety even if I have to die. Dugucho could barely speak now. Give it to me then. I'll do it quickly right away. If I delay any longer, I'm afraid I won't be able to hold myself back from coveting these spiritual items. This is 2F** King tempting, isn't it? King Yama picked a secluded spot and the group gathered to guard him. King Yama was decisive indeed, setting up the formation swiftly. With a loud bang, a ghastly fog shrouded the area. Everyone present was at the pinnacle of the world, so it was only natural that they could feel the ghastly fog's uniqueness. It was like an independent space isolated from the rest of the world, yet they could vaguely see King Yama's various movements. King Yama extended his hand and took the various treasures of heaven and earth from Yun Yang's hands, arranging them neatly. Basically, he placed them right after he had taken them, not leaving a single one behind. Ji Lingxi, who was watching intently, suddenly felt that something was amiss. With a sideways glance, she saw a patch of emerald green growing on top of Yun Yang's head. A tender leaf bud popped out. There was an eye on the leaf bud, watching King Yama set up the formation with interest. His head had turned green. Ji Lingxi poked Shengguan Lingxiu with a pout. Shengguan Lingxiu stole a glance and could not help blushing. She pinched Yun Yang and chided, "What do you mean? Can't you let it come out from your shoulder? Why does it have to come from the head?" Yun Yang reached out to touch it, his expression turning pale as he kept Emmy forcefully for the first time in his life. He scolded, "If you want to come out in the future, anywhere is fine. You're not allowed to come out from the head." "Aya!" Emmy cried out in confusion. It had come out from this position many times in the past. Why was it not allowed now? It had no idea what it meant. Was it different? Of course it was. In the past, everyone's head had turned green when they saw it. Now it was seen by others and it was even seen by his fiancée. Of course it was different. It was very, very different. In the next moment, while everyone was watching with rapt attention, a green glow suddenly appeared between Yun Yang's thighs. Emmy had found a new spot to come out. Shengguan Lingxiu and Ji Lingxi could not help clutching their stomachs, laughing so hard that their stomachs hurt. Seeing that Yun Yang did not seem to mind, they laughed even harder. King Yama was done setting up the formation. Dugucho handed over the ethereal amethyst bottle that contained his wife's soul like it was a rare treasure. Everyone stepped back. King Yama hollered, "Your cultivation base is profound and your aura is thick. Don't let the yang qi of vitality clash with the soul." As Yun Yang and the rest listened and retreated thousands of feet back, the wraith fog suddenly surged in front of them. Bolts of black lightning tore through the void soundlessly. The King Yenluo muttered under his breath. After a long speech, he concluded, "Hurry up and return." Countless bolts of black lightning encircled the formation, and the 10 flower of the other shore wilted together. Feng Lingtian said. The content was rather messy, so he decided to just name it as a chapter. 10,000 words, isn't that satisfying? Give me some votes. Chapter 1458. Then a clap of thunder descended from the sky. The lightning was unusually bright, blinding everyone's eyes for a moment. When it was about to strike, the entire palace of 9 Supremes shook. King Yenluo came out, covering his eyes. He turned to Dugucho and said, "I'm telling you, although your wife has been successfully revived, you can only look and not move in these first 16 years. Do you understand? This is actually the process of growing from a baby to a 16-year-old. You can't move without permission, understand?" Dugucho asked anxiously, "Can we talk?" "Yes, I can." King Yenluo rolled his eyes. "But the thing that can only be done between husband and wife has to be strictly forbidden in these 16 years. No exceptions can be made." Dugucho's face was flushed as he nodded. I know. She still has a natural medicinal fragrance on her. It's tempting to commit a crime. You guys figure this out yourselves. I'm leaving." King Yenluo was about to vanish into a cloud of gray mist. Just as he was about to burrow into the ground, he said, "Dugucho, your wife is naked. Find her some clothes quickly." With that, he disappeared without a trace. Dugucho dashed forward with a cry. Then the group heard a soft voice say something in the wraith fog. Then Dugucho repeated the words. The group exchanged a smile and disappeared in unison, not wanting to be the third wheel. When Dugucho and his wife walked out, they realized that the back of the mountain was empty. Obviously, everyone had avoided them. When Dugucho came out with his wife, he was greeted by hundreds of people. The entire palace of 9 Supremes upper echelons were huddled together excitedly, watching with widened eyes. "So beautiful, She's the martial world's top beauty indeed. Exactly. No wonder Dugucho can't forget her. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to let it go either. Dugucho was all smiles as he bowed to everyone. Please make way. Go. Thank you, thank you. Let us go thank the sect leader first. Everyone remember to come and drink. Remember? The group answered in unison. Dugucho's wife's face was flushed. She grabbed Dugucho's hand tightly with one hand and lowered her head, not daring to lift it. She had never thought that she would be able to see the light of day again after being muddled for so long. He even had a body. He was still alive. It was like a dream. Moreover, he was surrounded by so many people the moment he walked out with a body. The main hall was brightly lit. It was already midnight. Thank you, Lord Supreme Cloud, thank you, madam. Dugucho and his wife fell to their knees before Yunyang, kowtowing repeatedly. Their gratitude could not be expressed with words. When one's cultivation base had reached Dugucho's level, it was rare for him to even bend his back or bow his body, let alone kneeling. Now, however, he was prostrating himself on the ground, kowtowing as if he was pounding garlic. There was no other reason other than the deep love between husband and wife, and the grudge they had against the netherworld. There's no need to be so courteous. We're a family. Yunyang helped the couple up with a friendly expression. Ji Lingxi and Shengguan Lingxiu, on the other hand, circled Dugucho's wife curiously, studying her from head to toe. They had seen with their own eyes a pile of elixirs turn into a person, and now he was alive and well. Anyone who saw such a scene that exceeded their understanding would inevitably feel that it was strange. If it were not for the fact that they thought it was rude, both of them would have gone forward to touch her and take off her clothes to see for themselves. However, there was one thing that the King Yenluo had mentioned before. Dugucho's wife was now a spiritual medicine in human form. Just by looking at her, the fragrance she exuded was enough to lift one's spirits. Ji Lingxi could not help speaking to Shengguan Lingxiu telepathically. Do you think Dugucho will not be able to hold himself back and eat his wife in the future? Shengguan Lingxiu shuddered, staring at Ji Lingxi with widened eyes. Ji Lingxi chuckled dryly. I'm just saying, Dugu, now that your wish has been fulfilled, do you have any plans for the future? Yunyang could feel Dugucho's current state of mind and could not help sighing inwardly. Perhaps this was the best thing that could happen to Dugucho. Dugucho was stunned for a moment before he said, going against the demon race will naturally be the first priority. Yunyang asked, what happens after that? Dugucho was taken aback when he heard the question. Realization dawned in his eyes immediately. He hesitated and said, looking at Lord Supreme Cloud's arrangements during this period of time, I'm rather touched. If the Bound of Universe's humans are defeated after this battle, Lord Supreme Cloud might stay in this world for a while longer. However, if the humans win, I'm afraid that Lord Supreme Cloud will have to leave this world. Yunyang nodded but did not speak. Half a year ago I finally broke through to the level of a demigod. This level is already a height that I dare not dream of. If I'm lucky enough to survive this battle? Dugucho gritted his teeth and said, I want to stay in the Bound of Universe for a long time. Yunyang sighed and said, I understand. With Dugucho's cultivation base and his fervent determination as a martial maniac, he would definitely achieve greater things if he followed Yunyang to break through the Celestial Palace. He would be a great help to Yunyang in the future, and he might even be able to reach the pinnacle of the universe. Now, however, Dugucho had made such a decision. It was heart-wrenching yet touching. Dugu, my original intention was not to resurrect your wife right now, but Lingxi was worried that something might go wrong in this battle and that you would have a great regret. That's why I've brought this forward, Yunyang said. If you're avoiding it because of this, you don't have to. In the universe we can support each other and ensure our own safety. Of course I know that, but, Dugucho chuckled humorlessly and turned to look at his wife. I, Dugucho, have cultivated my entire life and been determined to forge ahead. What I've relied on is my indomitable will. Now, however, my lifelong wish has been fulfilled. Even if I follow Lord Supreme Cloud to ascend to the universe, I'll lose the will to improve and it'll be hard for me to achieve more in the future. The second reason is that my humble wife has been blessed by Lord Supreme Cloud to be reborn, to transcend the cycle of reincarnation and return to the mortal realm. This is a great opportunity. Although a body forged with spiritual medicine is a step to heaven and a promising future, we still have to live under this sky. My humble wife is the top natural medicine, a treasure of heaven and earth that possesses the power to overturn the cycle of reincarnation. She's one of a kind in this world. Even if we go to the universe, we might still attract the covetous eyes of the strong. We might not be helping you but adding to the troubles by following you. Who knows when an accident might happen because of her physique. If we stay in the bound of universe, no one in this world will be able to do anything to us. We'll be safe. I, Dugucho, don't want to face this regret again. There's a third reason. I can see that all the peak masters in Ling Xiao have the ambition to soar into the sky. I believe that they will leave the bound of universe in the future and ascend to a higher level. I, Dugucho, will stay in the palace of 9 supremes. I dare not say more, but my wife and I will protect the palace of 9 supremes for you, so that it will remain safe and sound. Therefore, staying behind to look after the house is more suitable for me now, Dugucho said resolutely. Yin Yang sighed. That's good too. Everyone has their own aspirations. I won't force it. The reason why Yin Yang sighed was because of the first reason that Dugucho had mentioned. After his wife's resurrection, Dugucho's indomitable will to forge ahead had vanished into thin air. Other than the war between the 2 tribes in the Bloody Soul Mountain, the only thought that remained in his mind was to spend the rest of his life with his wife. Such a Dugucho would only be like what he had said, he would not be able to go far. If he were to force him to follow him to traverse the universe, he might be harming him instead. How could a martial artist who had lost the will to forge ahead expect too much? He was destined to be powerless. The second reason was also the truth. A spiritual herb in human form like this was rare even in the universe. If a starry warrior were to encounter it, something would definitely happen to him due to this physique. The risk was considerable. You don't have to sigh for me anymore, veritable leader. To me, my life has never been more complete. I have no more regrets, Dugucho said in satisfaction. Besides, if all of us leave, I won't be at ease if there's no one to guard the base. Watching Dugucho carefully supporting his wife who was still walking unnaturally, Ji Lingxi and Shengguan Lingxiu could not hide the envy on their faces. It's easy to find a priceless treasure, but it's hard to find a lover. For that woman to be able to obtain such a man, her life is not in vain. Shengguan Lingxiu sighed as well. Her lover passed away, separated by life and death, but her infatuation never changed. She waited for an illusory chance of resurrection for hundreds of years. For this, she did not hesitate to risk her life. Finally, her dream came true, her soul returned, and they were reunited. This is a legendary love story, one that makes others envious. Yun Yang said with a dark expression, husband and wife have reunited. What are you two saying here? Are you really that envious? Ji Lingxi snorted and said with a similarly dark expression, all right, I'll let you two reunite today. I won't be an eyesore here anymore. Before her words echoed in the air, she left with a flick of her sleeves. Shengguan Lingxiu, on the other hand, was flushed, stunned on the spot. Yun Yang was dumbfounded, still in disbelief. What did she mean? Had the seal been lifted? Or perhaps it was Shengguan Lingxiu. His thoughts raced and his reflexes were lightning fast. He grabbed Shengguan Lingxiu, who was about to leave, and asked, Sister Lingxiu, what did Lingxi mean by that? Shengguan Lingxiu was flushed as she struggled with all her might, but she felt weak all over. She covered her face and said, how would I know what she meant? Why don't you ask her what she said? Yun Yang did not let go of her and said, I'm afraid she doesn't understand either. Why don't you explain it to the public, Sister Lingxiu? It's all right, I'm patient. You can explain it again and again. I'll experience it carefully and think about it slowly. I'll understand eventually. As he spoke, he scooped Shengguan Lingxiu up and walked towards his own dormitory with a strange chuckle. As he walked, he laid down layer after layer of sage restrictions, blocking all possible spies from the outside. Shengguan Lingxiu felt weak all over as she was held in his embrace. Her head was buzzing as well, as if she had lost the ability to think. Her powerful strength that was already at the pinnacle of this world was nowhere to be found. Suddenly she felt a softness on her back. She had been placed on the bed. No, don't. You. Shengguan Lingxiu tried to push him away, but it was as if she was welcoming him. Ha ha ha. Yun Yang tossed his clothes aside and chuckled strangely. Sister Lingxiu, this young brother has been waiting for this day for far too long. Years? 66,666 words have been omitted here. I won't describe it in detail, lest everyone accuses me of being lazy. You don't have to thank me for saving a few bucks of subscription fees for everyone. That night, his wish was finally fulfilled. Yun Yang, who had gotten rid of the title of Little White, did not sleep the entire night. When the sun rose from the east the next day and the horizon broke, Supreme Leader Yun got off the bed and dressed himself slowly. He said slowly, I'm going to check on the disciples' cultivation. What are they trying to do by breaking through the seals so early in the morning? Shengguan Lingxiu, who was behind him, did not respond. She had long fallen into a deep sleep. For the entire night, the only thing that Shengguan Lingxiu was thankful for was that her cultivation base was still decent and that she had listened to her master and only given it to him after attaining the level of a saint. In spite of this, she did not rest for the entire night. She was mentally and physically exhausted. The longest break she had was to say a few words, "I can't take it anymore." "Sleep for a while?" "It's okay, I can take it." "You can take it, but I can't." Shengguan Lingxiu felt that she had never slept so soundly since she started practicing martial arts. It was as if she could not wake up even if the sky were to fall. Just as Yunyang walked out of the hall, he was immediately sealed off with layers of seals. He asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" It was none other than Ji Lingxi. Ji Lingxi's face was filled with jealousy. She pouted and said in an annoyed tone, "What do you think? Did you have a good night last night? You must be satisfied and high-spirited after tasting what you wanted, right?" Yunyang chuckled and said with a smug face, "How am I satisfied? It's far from enough." "If you..." Ji Lingxi's face was flushed as she said angrily, "Nonsense! What nonsense are you spouting? Be careful that I don't beat you up, you lecher." Yunyang laughed. "Who's outside?" Yun Xiuxin's voice rang out, "Master, it's your disciple. Please grant me a meeting regarding the report on the casualties in Blood Soul Mountain last month." Yunyang nodded and said, "Come in." Yun Xiuxin came in with her head shrunk. When she saw Yunyang's face, her eyes lit up and she blurted out, "Master, you look so handsome today. Did something good happen?" Yunyang could not help but smile from the bottom of his heart. Yes, there are indeed many good things. Show me the report." What he saw was Ji Lingxi rolling her eyes in a frenzy. She took the report and skimmed through it, musing for a while before saying, "Well done. Have the compensation for the deceased disciples been sent? Is there someone to supervise it?" Feng Lingtian said. "I realize that there are geniuses among you. Many of you can predict perfectly as described in this chapter, and many of you can think of things that I can't." Chapter 1459. It's been sent a long time ago. Our sect has always given compensation as soon as possible, so there are few omissions. Still, send someone to supervise it just in case. Yes. Have you arranged for the punishment hall to investigate the aftermath? It has been arranged. That's good. We must not let our disciples shed blood and tears. At least, we must put an end to this kind of phenomenon in the Palace of Nine Supremes. Don't let it go unpunished. Anyone who violates the rules will not be treated lightly. Now the disciples of Blood Soul Mountain have sent a message asking if this month still needs to be called back. Yunyang thought for a moment and said, "What's the situation at Blood Soul Mountain now?" According to the report, the situation is still in a state of unhurried stalemate. Although the frequency of fighting has increased, the increase is not very large, said Yun Xiuxin. It's just that. Hu Xiaofan is there now, and he has reported in a secret letter that sometimes in the dead of the night, when he spreads out his divine sense with all his might, he will occasionally hear the sound of waves crashing. But there is no sea or even a river at Blood Soul Mountain, and it's a world of ice and snow everywhere. No one else has noticed this movement and only he has heard it. Even he doesn't dare to say it. We all say that he is crazy, making a fuss about nothing and making trouble out of nothing. Yunyang was immediately vigilant. The sound of waves? What exactly is the situation? With Xiaofan's temperament, he won't speak without thinking. There must be a reason. Xiaofan went out to train some time ago and accidentally fell into an ancient cave abode and obtained some inheritance. This is nothing, but according to him, there is a 10,000-year-old ice jade box in the cave abode, and there is nothing in the box but 2 lotus slices. Hu Xiaofan ate it without asking anything, and then the power of his divine sense skyrocketed, almost 10 times stronger. He often shows off in front of his disciples, saying that he heard some strange noise, but we don't believe it. Yun Xiuxin giggled and said, "But his inheritance is really something. Not to mention the others, even I've used all my strength and my trump card, but I've only managed to fight him to a draw. Master, are you not going to teach me 1 or 2 more moves? If I can't defeat him, not only will I embarrass eldest senior sister, but I'll also embarrass you, Master." Yunyang did not beat around the bush. He tossed a jade slip to her and said, "There's a saber style inside. As long as you practice it well, you'll be able to defeat Xiaofan." It was not that Yunyang was favoring one and discriminating against the other. With Hu Xiaofan's temperament, if he were to become the eldest senior brother, he might even poke a hole in the sky. Therefore he had to leave behind someone to deal with him. After sending Yun Xiaoxin away, he frowned. The sound of waves? Hu Xiaofan said he heard the sound of waves, but no one else heard it. This matter was really worth discussing. During the time Yun Yang was away, Hu Xiaofan had encountered many fortuitous encounters, and the speed of his cultivation base's advancement was no less than Yun Yang's in the past. His strength had risen to the top of the palace of 9 Supreme's disciples, and now he had reached the level of a 4th-tier saint. In the Blood Soul Mountain he could already be regarded as a top expert, and few could match him. Yun Yang did not believe that Hu Xiaofan was still boasting at this moment, not to mention that Yun Xiaoxin had mentioned just now that the power of Hu Xiaofan's divine sense had unexpectedly increased by 10 times over his current cultivation base. It was no longer an ordinary level of divine sense, but comparable to the divine sense of a saint cultivator. If Hu Xiaofan's words were true, then the sound of waves, Yun Yang frowned and said, "Don't withdraw Hu Xiaofan and the others for now. The second batch of people will go there directly and set up camp at the foot of the Blood Soul Mountain. Be careful and guard against any unexpected variables." Yes. Also, tell Hu Xiaofan to listen closely to the sound of the waves he mentioned every night. Monitor the volume and intensity of the sound, and it will be best if he can confirm its movement. Master, this is obviously Hu Xiaofan bragging. At first, we all believed him, but after asking around, so many seniors, including the saints, did not hear any sound of waves. We don't believe it at all. I just mentioned it to you just for fun, said Yun Xiaoxin. Yun Yang said, whether he is bragging or not, I want him to listen carefully. Tell him that if he is telling the truth, he will be imprisoned for 100 years when he comes back. Ha ha ha. Yun Xiaoxin gloated. Very well, master. I'll tell him word for word. Yun Xiaoxin left. Yun Yang, however, was still deep in thought. The sound of waves. With the power of my divine sense, it should be the best in the bound of universe now. When it's quiet in the middle of the night, I can even hear the sound of waves tens of thousands of miles away as long as I listen carefully. If it's Hu Xiaofan, it's roughly equivalent to the limit of a beginner saint's hearing, so it should be about 3,000 miles? If it's a middle level one, 5,000 miles? I hope it's not true as everyone said. But if Xiaofan does hear the sound of waves, it's not a small matter. It will be the beginning of a huge hidden danger. Only Yun Yang had been to the interior of the demon race, so he had a rough idea of the situation there. The distance from the Blood Soul Mountain to the demon race's internal sea was nearly tens of thousands of miles. With such a long distance, even if Yun Yang came here personally, he would not be able to hear the sound of waves, let alone Hu Xiaofan. The closest thing to the Blood Soul Mountain was a huge glacier 4 to 5,000 miles away, which had nothing to do with the sea. Yun Yang was actually very wary of the demon race's internal sea. The area of the demon race's ocean was more than 10 times larger than the land. If there were no powerful beasts in it, Yun Yang would not believe it anyway. Take the Lunar River for example. Not only did the strange fish in the Lunar River possess the monstrous strength to transcend levels, but they also had incredibly strong physical bodies. The high-level golden monstrous fish king also possessed terrifying mental strength, which allowed it to break through Yun Yang's rarely failed water manifestation. There were more than a dozen high-level golden monstrous fish kings, so who knew if there was an even more terrifying emperor mermaid among them. Speaking of the ocean, Yun Yang had seen quite a number of places that were separated by the ocean when they passed through the territories of the demon race. The Lunar River, for example, was only one of the many tributaries that flowed into the ocean. Since the Lunar River could be monopolized by the Golden Monstrous Fish clan, the other tributaries might be equally or even more terrifying. The combat power that the demon race had displayed so far was perhaps only the tip of the iceberg. The war between the two races did not bode well for the human race. Looks like there's a need to make another trip to the demon race. Yun Yang stood up and muttered to himself. I'm going too. Ji Lingxi said loudly from the side. Yun Yang gave her a sideways glance and said, Why are you going? I can ensure that no one will find out if I go alone. You'll only add to the chaos if you come along. Ji Lingxi was enraged. Yun Yang, don't take it for granted. It was me who persuaded Sister Lingxiu last night to let you have it. How could you do this? As she spoke, her eyes were rimmed red, her heart filled with an inexplicable sense of grievance. I've always been considerate of you, swallowing my pride to persuade Sister Lingxiu for a few days. You heartless bastard, how dare you despise me and shout at me? Yun Yang leaned forward and said in a flattering tone, I knew that little Lingxi couldn't bear for me to hold it in like this. The truth has proven that little Lingxi is still my little sweetheart. You're the most considerate of me. I'm so touched, so grateful. Ji Lingxi blushed and said, Lecher, that's your little sweetheart. Go back and tell Sister Lingxiu. Don't disgust me here. Yunyang stopped her from leaving and said, Lingxi, my feelings for you can only be seen by the heavens. Oh, we've been engaged for so long. Say, when can you be released like Lingxiu? Yunyang stopped her from leaving and said, Lingxi, Ji Lingxi said angrily, I knew that you're a bad boy. Isn't Sister Lingxiu enough? I won't be released anymore. Yunyang chuckled and used his shamelessness to coax her left and right, but he was sighing inwardly. She won't even let me touch her, what's the point of coaxing her? After a while, Ji Lingxi finally broke into a smile and said, Then let me ask you, between me and Sister Lingxiu, who do you like more? Yunyang put his hand on his chest and said in an extremely mushy manner, Little Lingxi is my sweetheart, Lingxiu is my baby. Blurg. The sound of someone vomiting came from outside the hall, as if they had practiced it. Yunyang turned to look in the direction of the sound. He saw Shi Wuchen, Luo Dajiang, Jiang Luo Luo, Dong Qitian, and 7 to 8 other Palace of 9 Supremes higher-ups standing at the door, looking at him with mocking expressions. Ji Lingxi covered her face when she saw that. Without another word, she tore the dimension apart and fled hastily. Only Yunyang's skin was thicker than the city walls. He only felt a slight warmth before he said solemnly, What's there to look at? Who hasn't coaxed their wives before? What are you laughing at? Do you all think that you won't have such a day? Especially you, Luo Dajiang. You're no longer a bachelor now that you've gotten a wife. What are you coaxing? The crowd snorted. Luo Dajiang, who was the first to bear the brunt, said, I admit that I've coaxed my wives before. I believe that everyone else has coaxed their wives before, but only the boss can coax them to such a mushy degree. We're no match for him. It's a wonder. Everyone responded in unison, voicing their agreement. Yunyang said impatiently, If you have something to say, say it. If not, go do what you're supposed to do. Hurry up. There's something, and it's something serious. As the crowd walked in, Yunyang realized that there were more than a few people in front of him. There were more than a dozen of them. Other than those who had gone to the Bloody Soul Mountain to defend, the rest of the higher-ups at home were all here. What is it? It was obvious that Yunyang was still immersed in the pleasure of the previous night. He looked as if he had tasted the sweetness of the meal and had forgotten about his duties. Now that so many people had arrived, he was shocked as well. You'll need to decide on 2 matters yourself, said Dong Qitian. What are they? The first is, of course, the battle with the demon race. Are we going to go to the Bloody Soul Mountain in full force? Or are we going in batches like before, leaving some people to guard the mountain gate? Yunyang nodded and said, This is easy. Send all the disciples who are capable of participating in this battle. Even if we don't need so many people, set up camp at the foot of the Bloody Soul Mountain and wait for the rotation. We'll never return until the battle ends. This battle is where justice lies. There's no turning back. As for the mountain gate, leave 2 or 3 pinnacle experts to guard the place. When the battle starts and the front is in a tight spot, tear the space apart and rush over to help. Understood. The second matter is about the 9 Supremes Palace's grand plan. Dong Qitian asked seriously, Have you considered it? What grand plan? So serious? In the future, the 9 Supremes Palace will rise and ascend to the pinnacle of the bound of universe's human sections. It'll be invincible in this world, but prosperity comes and goes. To protect the sect's reputation, we have a long way to go. How can we not think about the long term and seek for long-term peace? Yunyang was silent for a moment before he said, I have no intention of interfering with the future. Every sect will rise and fall, glory and disgrace. Children and grandchildren have their own blessings. Calculating too much will only make the future generations rely on us too much. We're all going to leave this world in the future, but there must be an order. Let's leave the future to the last one to worry about. Dong Qitian smacked his lips. It was very irresponsible of Yunyang to say this, but it was indeed the most convenient way. After all, no one could tell what the future would be like. It was even harder to come to a conclusion. Only the last one left had the right to decide. It was impossible for these people to ascend at the same time, so there must be an order. Yunyang said, No sect is the eternal protagonist, never to fall. Take the Palace of 9 Supremes as an example. If we were to say that the first batch of founding elders have all left this world, I think it would take at least 5,000 years. The group nodded silently. Not only was the number not exaggerated, it was rather conservative. Also, there will always be some elders who don't have enough luck. Even if they're capable, they might not be able to comprehend. It'll be difficult for them to break through the last step, but it'll take at least 20,000 years for them to no longer exist in this world, right? The group nodded. The number was still a little conservative. It's only been a few days since we've established the sect. Aren't we worrying too much when we're already planning for 20,000 years? With our current setup, it should be more than enough to sustain the sect for 20,000 years. Yun Yang spread his arms. Everyone, you're thinking too much. It's too far away. The group was speechless for a moment. It was true. That was indeed the case. However, many of them still felt that it was a pity. Such a powerful sect had never existed since the beginning of time. What if they could pass on their legacy for thousands and thousands of generations? How wonderful would that be? Everyone knew that it was impossible. It was an extravagant hope. You're worrying too much. Yun Yang smiled. If you meet a prodigal, you'll lose everything, even if it's the Iron Ruler of the world. If you meet a worthy disciple, even if it's a lowly sect, he can develop it into one of the 3 celestial palaces. Don't worry about the future. The group was convinced. Their leader was the most open-minded. Their leader was still the best. The state of mind. It was simply incredible. Otherwise, he would be the leader of the sect. With his bare hands, he forcefully took down such a huge sect. Apart from ascending to the top, he still did not yearn for power and position, nor did he feel lonely at the top. It was only because his martial arts path and his desire to improve had never been extinguished. He never stopped moving forward, and he had no regrets. Yun Yang informed Dongfang Haoran and the others about the waves and emphasized, guard against the other side luring the sea over. Even with Yun Yang's seriousness, Dongfang Haoran and the others were still unconcerned. Luring the sea? How could it be so easy? Feng Lingtian said. The plot was like a mad dog that had escaped its leash, sprinting towards the end. Amp GT. Chapter 1460. The reason was simple. The amount of work required was too great, almost exceeding the limits of manpower. Even if it could be drawn here, no matter what kind of ocean it was, how much power could it retain after drawing the seawater for hundreds of thousands of miles? Was this a joke? Even if the sea was really drawn here, it would only be a small river in the end. Moreover, the Blood Soul Mountain was covered in ice and snow all year round. The entire Blood Soul Mountain was just a huge iceberg. Seawater? That was a joke. The 3 rulers did not pay too much attention to the great demon in the sea. The human and demon races had been fighting for countless years, so they had a rough idea of the top combat power of both sides. Although the experts of the sea race had never shown themselves, they were still the sea race. How could they stay on land for long? The Blood Soul Mountain was a natural barrier. The sea race would never be able to come over, and it was hard to say if they could even join the war. Even if they did, the sea race's power would be reduced on land. Yun Yang did not have any evidence on this matter, so he could only inform them. He had wanted to contact the Fox Emperor and the Cat Ancestor to see if he could get some evidence, but he could not contact them at all. They were probably busy and had no time to spare. Yun Yang did not dwell on this matter. Besides, it was sect leader Yun's big day. She had been single for so many years. Now that she had a new partner, how could she hold herself back? She would do her best to satisfy herself. If a war were to break out now, Yun Yang would probably be upset. Look at the time. No war? That's great, haha. This sect leader is enjoying himself at home, having a good he. For the next month, the Bound of Universe was in a state of panic. The attacks of the demon race were getting more and more aggressive, but leader Yun stayed in the Palace of 9 Supremes without stepping out. He chatted with Ji Lingxi in the day and spent the night with Shengguan Lingxiu. He was aroused in the day, and at night, he was living like an immortal. However, such a beautiful day would come to an end. Another piece of breaking news came. Wuxiaofan. The sound of the waves is getting closer. Now, as long as one's cultivation base is above the 4th level of a Saint Monarch, they can hear the sound of the waves when it's quiet. It's not just my words, it's true. Yun Yang was shocked to hear the news. If many people could hear it, it meant that the seawater was very close. The demons could not hide it even if they wanted to. That distance was probably around 1,000 miles or so. Everyone move out. Prepare to fight the Blood Soul Mountain. After giving the order, Yun Yang tore through space and hurried towards the starry night of the Crimson Soul Mountain with Ji Lingxi and Shengguan Lingxiu in tow. At the same time, the 3 sovereigns received Yun Yang's message and hurriedly carried out the succession ceremony before hurrying over. Yun-yang and the two ladies tore the space apart and hurried on their way. However, halfway through their journey, the Fox Emperor's jade pendant that had lain dormant for a long time suddenly emitted a scorching aura. "It's urgent." Yun-yang hurriedly took it out and wanted to ask what was going on, but he realized that the call would not go through. Yun-yang tried again and again but to no avail. With a frown he said, "I have to go to the demonic race first. Both of you, let's go together." The two girls shouted at the same time. Very well. Yun-yang thought about it again. Now that the two ladies' cultivation base had reached the Saint Realm, they could always escape even if they encountered the demonic race's army. Moreover, they had that domineering power that could devour them. They were basically a weapon that could turn the tables. He did not insist further and acquiesced to the two ladies' journey. The trio's speed increased again as they hurried towards the Crimson Soul Mountain. However, when they were 3,000 miles away from the mountain, Yun-yang felt that something was not right. Why does it feel so damp? The air was filled with a humid atmosphere. To Yun-yang, who was well versed in the cloud and water forms, it was not too obvious. "It's normal for the weather to be damp when it's snowing heavily," Jilingxi said nonchalantly. Indeed, the snow was falling, covering the sun and the sky. It was so dense that no one could be seen on the other side. Even if it's snowing heavily, the air shouldn't be so damp. "This isn't normal." Yun-yang said, "Both of you sense it carefully. There's actually a warmth in such weather. We're not too far away from the Crimson Soul Mountain. It's affected by the extreme cold of the mountain all year round. Moreover, it's so high up in the sky. It's normal for a drop of water to freeze into ice at this time of the season. Where's the warmth coming from?" The three of them continued on their journey. In less than the time it took to drink 2 cups of tea, the Crimson Soul Mountain was already in sight. The densely packed campgrounds at the foot of the mountain came into view as well. Various sects, gangs and local forces were all gathered here. At a glance, the entire land was filled with tents, stretching all the way to the mountainside. Millions of human cultivators of Saint Emperor and above were all gathered here. In spite of this, what struck the trio as odd was the fact that many of them were dressed in autumn attire and did not look like they were cold. Some of them were even half naked, gathering to drink and chat in a random spot amidst the heavy snow. Although it was said that once one's cultivation base had reached a certain level, one would still need to circulate their cultivation base to resist the cold. In the face of a great battle that could break out at any time, it was not appropriate to squander mystical chi so recklessly. Yun-yang looked again and found that these people did not use mystical chi. Some of them were even emitting hot steam. They were actually dressed like this because of the weather. Yun-yang retracted his mystical chi defense and carefully sensed the surrounding atmosphere. Immediately he felt a warm air coming from the air, making him feel a sense of laziness and warmth. On the distant peak of the Crimson Soul Mountain, there was already a lot of snow that showed signs of melting. Below the mountainside, there was a gurgling stream flowing downwards. The current temperature was more than 10 times higher than the last time he came. If the temperature here was originally 100 degrees below zero, it would be 3 or 4 degrees above zero now, or even slightly higher. In short, it was a comfortable temperature suitable for living. Seeing this scene, Yun-yang's face suddenly turned pale. How could there be such a drastic change in the temperature around the Crimson Soul Mountain, and what would be the consequences of such a drastic change in temperature? If the many snowy mountains around them melted at the same time, and the snow melted into water and flowed down, what would happen? Was it only the snowy mountains on this side that were melting now? What if the many snowy mountains on the demon race's side melted as well? Thinking of this, Yun-yang could not help but shudder. What was the demon race doing? What were they trying to achieve? Waves. Waves? Yun-yang's heart skipped a beat. He was about to arrive at the Crimson Soul Mountain, but his camp had changed their route at the last minute. With a whoosh, Yun-yang landed on the peak of the Crimson Soul Mountain. Yun-yang saw that the dozen or so Saint Lords who stayed behind were all on standby, standing outside with solemn expressions, watching the demon race's flatlands below. Yun-yang followed the crowd's line of sight through the thick clouds and was shocked to see that the demon realm's plains had turned into crisscrossing rivers. Looking at the source, it seemed to stretch towards the demon realm's inland. There were big and small rivers and there were many of them. A few of them were at least thousands of feet wide, surging forward with great momentum. What bothered Yun-yang more, however, were the giant ice blocks floating on the river's surface. They were either colliding with each other or squeezing into a ball, all of them slowly flowing downstream. As the massive water flow continued, the places that it passed through naturally formed riverbeds. Some of the low-lying areas had even turned into lakes, and when the lakes were full, they spontaneously looked for other places for water to flow. As the water flowed, many rivers converged into one and gradually flowed downwards. As far as the eye could see, the once beautiful Fox Race's flatlands was now a scene of devastation, filled with rivers. Lord Supreme Cloud. Yunyang knew all these Saint Lords who were stationed at the Crimson Soul Mouth. They were all from the East Celestial Palace. Thank you for your hard work, everyone. Lord Supreme Cloud, do you think the demon race, should we use water to attack? One of the Saint Lords had white hair and beard, but he was respectful towards Yunyang. This Lord Supreme Cloud was a creator of miracles. This is already an undeniable fact. At this stage, the demon race will definitely use water to attack. Yunyang sighed heavily as he looked at the snow-capped mountains that were roaring and roaring. We know this as well, but it's been said that the entire demon race's inland is a huge basin. More than 60% of the outskirts are high mountains. If all the snow melts, I'm afraid the entire demon race's inland will turn into a vast ocean. The first to bear the brunt and suffer the most will be the demon race. There will be no more soil for them to live on. Other than a few flying tribes that can build their nests on the peaks of the mountains, the other tribes will suffer the disaster of extinction. Isn't this a suicidal move? Perhaps this is the demon race's higher-ups' plan. Yunyang's gaze was deep as he said faintly, I'm afraid this is far from enough. It hasn't reached the expectations of the demon race's higher-ups. This is still not enough. The Saint Lords stared at Yunyang in shock, then turned to look at the demon race's plains below. If this was still not enough, what was the demon race's higher-ups trying to do? Could it be that the entire demon clan's territory, such a vast area, would be transformed into a vast ocean? I guess the demon race is staking it all on this, putting everything on the line. Yunyang's voice was solemn. The demon race is using the threat of the entire tribe's survival as a last resort. A simple sea tsunami is definitely not enough to destroy the Blood Soul Mountain. There must be other means. This time the demon race is going all out. It's either win or die trying. However, why are the demon race's higher-ups so confident? They think that by doing this they can definitely break through the Blood Soul Mountain, the ultimate barrier that separates humans and demons that has stood for countless years. Yunyang looked up at the Blood Soul Mountain, which was immeasurably high and majestic and could not be shaken by human power alone. His eyes glinted as his thoughts ran wild. Other than its sturdiness, the Blood Soul Mountain was also augmented by the Saint power. It was a power that exceeded the bound of universe's limit. How could it be destroyed by mere seawater? Even an ordinary mountain could not be destroyed by seawater. At most, it could only drown it, but it could not be destroyed by brute force. To put it bluntly, even if the entire bound of universe was submerged by seawater, there would still be a large portion of the Blood Soul Mountain above the water's surface. This was an impossible strategy that could never succeed. However, the demon race was obviously doing this. There must be something fishy about it, but they could not figure it out yet. Let's go. Yunyang, Ji Lingxi, and Shengguan Lingxiu took a step forward and passed through the passageway between the two realms, speeding towards the demon realm on the other side. Lord Supreme Cloud, be careful. The Fox Emperor, who had been missing for a long time, was now in a terrible state. The entire Fox clan had been surrounded by water. If it was a direct battle, the Fox Emperor was not afraid. With the strength of the entire Fox clan, even if the Dragon clan attacked in full force and the Fox clan was inevitably annihilated, they were confident that they could deal a heavy blow to the Dragon clan. They might not even have the ability to overwhelm the other clans. However, he did not expect the Demon Palace's experts to only focus on restraining the Fox clan's main force after they arrived. They did not fight to the death, only entangling and not doing anything else. Since the other party did not fight to the death, the weaker Fox clan had no reason to risk their lives. Therefore, both parties fell into an awkward stalemate, one that lasted day after day. From a certain day about a year ago, the weather suddenly changed for some unknown reason. It became hotter. This change did not have any effect on the ordinary fox race. However, as the climate changed, the living environment also changed bit by bit. The most obvious change was the downpour of rain every day. Later on, even the snow mountains began to melt. The original living environment suddenly underwent a huge change. Originally, the Fox clan's territory only had a few lakes, a few rivers and many wells. Although the climate was slightly dry, it was still sufficient for drinking. But now, there were dozens of rivers, thousands of lakes, and countless tributaries. It caused the Fox clan's dry area to suddenly become a flood disaster area. The Fox clan's original residences were all destroyed, and they had no choice but to move again and again. Up to this day, the flooding had reached the point where the Fox Emperor city was completely besieged. One should know that the Fox Emperor city was located at an extremely high point in the Fox clan's territory. The difference between the Fox Emperor city and the lower areas outside the city was almost 100 feet. Now, the water outside the Fox Emperor city was already 10 feet deep. This meant that the original flatland outside the Fox Emperor city, the deepest part of the water, had already reached a terrifying number of nearly 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet deep, what kind of concept was that? Under normal circumstances, even the deepest lake, as long as there were no demonic beasts or powerful water-type Shen beasts, would not be able to reach a depth of 1,000 feet. And this was originally a flat area. If it was the location of the lake, what would happen if the two overlapped? It was an unimaginably terrifying situation. Looking at the wails of his people, the Fox Emperor felt extremely helpless. No matter what race they were, most of them were ordinary and weak people. Even the Fox clan, which was considered a powerful race among the Demon clan, could not survive in the water for long. Today, the total population of the Fox clan had decreased by 70%. The Fox Emperor had never thought that the most terrifying power in this world was actually water. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.